from the low. Welcome to lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Hoops Peterson, now part of the VSiN family of podcasts. We've got a tremendous podcast for you. In segment number 2, we are going to be joined by one of our good friends, Blake Lovell. He does such amazing work over at Southeastern 14, taking a look at this game that we all know and love of college basketball, and we are going to be discussing what we've all seen out of these SEC teams with him. We're also going to be taking a look at the lay of the land in college basketball, what he's been making out of conference play thus far across the country. So we've got a lot of fun chatter coming up with Blake in segment number 2. In the final segment, going to get you guys picks and analysis on every game on the betting board for this college basketball Thursday as we hit some bank shots. If you do have a question, comment, segment idea, what have you for this podcast, do have one of two ways we offer those in. First one is my Twitter/X timeline at @GNet_D1. Keep in mind, Literacy name does not matter, so as per usual, please do send these into the timeline. And the other way, that's find an Apple Podcast review. If you rate this podcast 5 stars, it is very much appreciated. And from there, you're able to fire in whatever you'd like to hear on this podcast via that 5-star review. Did not get in any Twitter/X questions today, but we did get in a little bit of a shout-out request, and we do our best to be able to fulfill every one of these. So I know that we've got some fans out there at the Fairfield Budweiser, I believe, brewery/warehouse. You guys are appreciated. I love the fact that you guys chime in and everything like that. So if you ever want a shout out, fire those in as well at GUnit_D1. I'm more than happy to give you, your loved ones, your company, what have you, a shout out. And hey, if you do have a brewery, I'm always up for free beer as well. But that said, let's take a look at everything that we did see in college basketball on Wednesday and a little bit of late Tuesday as well, because the Greg Peterson Experience is on VSiN, the Sports Betting Network, from midnight to 3 Eastern Time, 9 to midnight Pacific Time. So I do have to record these a little bit in advance. So we're going to give you a little bit from Tuesday and take a look at what we all got on Wednesday, try to find some trends and try to get to know these teams a little bit better.
Games from yesterday is Greg buzzing about. Here is the rowdy recap.
It was a rough showing from Wisconsin, who went down to Penn State 87-83. This one was really getting hot and heavy after I had gone off the podcast yesterday, but for Penn State, they were able to go bombs away on a Wisconsin team that's been pretty solid all season long. And for Wisconsin, they do go 7-16 from three-point range, but Penn State 8 of 20 from the outside. They won the turnover battle 13-6. That has really been the bread and butter of this Penn State team all season long, and they did a nice job controlling things with being able to get 27 points out of Kanye Cleary. He was really able to come up big in this one. And for Wisconsin, he did have AJ Storr come through for 23 points. Looks like he was able to bust through with his 3-point shooting, but that said, a very big and impactful win for Penn State. The late night du jour game of New Mexico versus Utah State went the way of New Mexico, 99-86. A big statement from a New Mexico team that's actually been better defensively than offensively this year. And I mean, they get to 99 points while going 5 of 19 from three-point range against a really good Utah State defense. You saw Nelly Jr. Joseph be able to have 26 points, 8 boards in this game. Donovan Den, 14 assists, 15 points on just 1 turnover. New Mexico, 99 points on 7 turnovers. That was quite a statement. Really love to see that in Arkansas. I was doing this as their game was still going live. They did pull it out 78-77. We're going to be talking certainly about them a little bit more with Blake Lovell in segment number 2. But man, we had some fun there. And what else has been fun is taking a look at VMI versus just anyone games, as this game actually went under the total, despite the fact that VMI gave up 100, because right now they have just been that sorry. 100-60. Furman, who had lost to a D2 program less than 45 days prior, they just completely kicked the tar out of VMI, going 18 of 37 from three-point range. Now, good news for this Furman team is that they've been without Marcus Foster for quite a while. He came back for the first time in north of a month, 18 points, 10 boards, very good showing there. But for VMI, they are now 4-11 against the spread. It has been an almighty struggle for them, and they become quite the fate. How about Kentucky just continuing to get games over the total and just continuing to get the job done? They get the win, they get the cover against Mississippi State by kind of 90-77. Now, my conversation with Blake was recorded prior to this game going final, but now Kentucky 13 overs and just 3 unders thus far this season. As for Kentucky, they were able to get a very massive performance out of Robert Dillingham off the bench, 16 points, 4 boards, 4 assists. But how about Antonio Reeves showing his might, 27 points. He goes 2 of 5 from three-point range. And for Mississippi State, they did go 9 of 27 from 3. Tolu Smith, 26 points, 8 rebounds. But Kentucky also played even up on the glass. They were able to do a relatively solid job of being able to find a way to be able to get to the charity stripe as well. 23 of 27 at the free throw line. So very big win there. And for Ole Miss, they do suffer their second loss of the season. LSU is able to take them down 89-80, and LSU all of a sudden looking very different with having Jarius Cook back in the fold. 16 points, 4 boards. It gives the team just a little bit of facilitation in general. And then Justin Wright was Mr. Wright in this game. 27 points, 7 steals, 7 rebounds, 5 assists. And Ole Miss, they went just 6 of 24 from three-point range. So they were as cold as an igloo, but not as cold as Creighton. The unders have really been coming through in Creighton games recently. I believe that they have now played 5 out of their last 6 games of the under. Actually, 6 out of their last 7 games of the under, as they put up just 48 points against UConn. 62-48. UConn is able to just completely dominate this game. Donovan Clingan did play in this game. He had 6 points, 5 rebounds off the bench. He did have a pair of blocks, but it was just all about what you were able to get out of the likes of the backcourt with Tristan Newton, Cam Spencer, combined 29 points, 14 rebounds, 7 assists to 2 turnovers. And for Creighton, they just went cold. 6 of 26 from three-point range. They lose the turnover battle as well, 14-7. They lose a rebound battle, 48-32. And this is a Creighton team I do think that perhaps we need to be a little bit concerned about. And for Virginia, there's been some fair concern with this team, but they were able to get the job done against Virginia Tech. 65-57 has been a very different Virginia team, home to road. And for Virginia, the way that they were able to get it done is that they've been struggling on the glass all season long. Won that rebound battle 33-32 with Reese Beekman and Jordan Minor coming up major. A combined 32 points between those two gentlemen for Virginia. They win the turnover battle 15-7 as well, so that was of great impact. And also of great impact for Bankrolls was the DK Network write-up pick coming through. Nothing like being able to give out a nice no-sweat winner. I do always have to highlight that. We had over of like 153.5 to 154, depending upon your number at Tulsa versus UTSA. Meep, the Roadrunners gave up north of 100, 107-78. So that was absolutely tremendous for UTSA. They were really able to get things rolling with Jordan Ivy Curry giving the team 19 points, but PJ Haggerty, he puts in their 25 points. For Tulsa, they go 16 out of 29 from three-point range. You had also in this game right around 17 points out of both Isaiah Barnes along with Kobe Williams. So for Tulsa, a very, very glorious win and cover for them, and for us, a glorious, nice DK Network write-up winner. Now 43-29, and how about Central Florida taking down Texas? It's been a Texas team that, well, they have been back to burning bankrolls ablaze. As for Texas, they lose this game by a count of 77-71. Central Florida, by the way, a top 20 team, turns points allowed on a per possession basis, and now Texas is 5-11 against the spread. Meanwhile, Central Florida, they're hovering right around 8-7, so they've been able to do a solid job there for Central Florida. They do allow Texas to go 10 of 26 from three-point range, but you were able to have Jalen Sellers, who's been ice cold all season long for Central Florida from three-point range, coming off the bench, 25 points, 5 boards. That was massive. At Central Florida, they win that battle on glass 37-22. They do lose the turnover battle 15-11, but another disappointment for Texas and another big win for Central Florida. Oklahoma, they were able to cover most numbers. They were a 12.5 to a 13-point favorite. I don't think this number got to 14, but they take down West Virginia 77-63. A West Virginia team that's now 6-10 against the spread. They've been having their issues. For Oklahoma, they do bounce back by being able to go 22 of 30 at the free throw line, while West Virginia, they're still dealing with the Jesse Edwards injury. He was out of the fold, and that really showed up with Oklahoma winning the rebound battle 33-19 and having a double-double, 12 points, 10 assists out of Otega Owe, who was able to do a very solid job. Actually, 10 rebounds, not 10 assists for Mr. Owe, but nice double-double there. And then we saw IUPUI, Iwi Pewee, be your biggest underdog winner of the night. They close as 16.5-point underdogs, and they take down Purdue Fort Wayne, and they really led wire to wire in this game, 85-79 for IUPUI. They go just 3 of 5 from three-point range. Jalen Counter was your main man with 18 points, but Quanzi Samuels comes up with 10 rebounds, and a Fort Wayne team that has been very good with their offense all season long wins a turnover battle by kind of 16-12, but they lose the rebound battle to IUPUI. They go 7 of 25 from three-point range, and this is actually a good Fort Wayne team this year as well. Just shows the craziness of college basketball, and Detroit very nearly got off the schneid against Robert Morris, just not able to have enough gas to be able to get it done. This is a game that went to double overtime, I believe it was, and for Robert Morris, they, for lack of a better term, survive and advance. 102-99. They avoid being the team that gave up Detroit's first win of the season. As for Detroit, they go just 8 of 27 from three-point range, but Jaden Sohn, their top scorer, is back. He had 36 points in this one. Marcus Sankersley had 29 points, but the team got plowed on the glass 49-31, and Marquise Hastings for this Robert Morris team chip in there 31 points, 15 rebounds. Also out there in the Atlantic 10, you very nearly got a nice upset winner with UMass. UMass falls by kind of 79-78 against Loyola Chicago. They were playing in this game without Matt Cross, but still a cover for UMass, who is now 12-5 against the spread. They've been able to make it quite a bit of money, and for Loyola Chicago, they continue to scuffle 7-10 against the spread. For Loyola Chicago, they get this one done because they were able to do a solid job of being able to win that aforementioned rebound battle by kind of 39-37 for Loyola Chicago. They did a relatively solid job of being able to keep things in check with regards to the interior, as well as UMass goes 8 of 20 from three-point range, but they go just 16 of 38 from inside the arc. And Phil Paulson, 23 points, 6 rebounds. That allowed Loyola Chicago to be able to get the job done. And how about the St. Bonaventure Bonnies? 99-64 all over Rhode Island as well. Fortunately, I'm just out of time with regards to recap, or else I'd give you guys a little bit more, so might have a little bit of cleanup on the podcast tomorrow as I do this. North Carolina in a game where the spread is very much in doubt, but they're currently leading Louisville by a count of 51-30. And right now, as I'm doing this, DePaul is getting crushed once again. George Mikan continuing to roll over in his grave. What a sad and pathetic season that has been in Houston. Currently up 15 points on Texas Tech. We shall see if Tech is able to get that cover or not. But right now, what we're seeing in college basketball is a whole lot of overs. 51.3% of games thus far this season have gone over. 1,434 overs to 1,362 unders, with a few games pending for Wednesday as I record this. Home underdogs, they're 352, 348, and 13 against the spread. So they've been mildly successful, but not enough to be able to make you money. Meanwhile, favorites, they're hitting at nearly 51%, 14-15, 1,363 and 47 against the spread thus far this season. And if you look at the last 7 days in college basketball, favorites, they've continued to roll. 152, 134, and 5 against the spread. That's a 53.1% hit rate, while home underdogs in this span of the last 7 days, 47, 48, and 1 against the spread. And overs have actually had a little bit of a rough go of it recently. We've seen a nice run on unders, 147 unders, 141 overs, and I believe 3 pushes along the way. So that's what we're seeing in college basketball right now, and that's what we all got on Wednesday. Now let's take a look at the SEC landscape with our good friend Blake Lovell of Southeastern 14 next, right here on Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Peterson, now a part of the VSiN Family Podcast. Lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Peterson, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. It is always great to be joined by this man as we've got aboard Blake Lovell. He does incredible work over there at Southeastern 14, taking a look at this great game that we all know and love of college basketball. I know that he, much like myself, has been trying to decipher what has been a wild and crazy year in college basketball, where last week we saw 4 of the top 5 teams in college basketball go down in a 72-hour time span, and yet somehow, someway, Blake Lovell remains sane, which that is a Herculean feat in and of itself. Blake does absolutely amazing work over on his Twitter/X feed at the Blake Lovell. Last name is spelled Lovell all together. And Blake, it's always great to have you aboard. Thank you.
Yeah, I always appreciate it, Greg. Yeah, we try to stay sane, but it's not easy this season trying to make sense of a lot of these teams. But this is college basketball. It's why we enjoy it. And yeah, it's going to be interesting here over the next couple months as we head towards the tournament.
Oh, there's no doubt about it. I know you guys have been knee-deep in SEC football coaching conversations as well with everything that happened with Nick Saban stepping down last week. So it's been a very, very busy weekend. I mean, it has been a very busy first few weeks out there in the SEC, where we've seen so many teams ascend. We saw Texas A&M be as cold as an igloo to begin the season, and then on Saturday they knock off Kentucky in one of the more harebrained games that we've seen all season long. Just what have you been making out of the first few weeks in the SEC? Because I think other than, dare I say, Vanderbilt and Arkansas, all these teams remain very live on any given night. Perhaps Missouri. Missouri's been rough as well. Other than those 3 teams, though, everyone, it feels like, is live to win on any given night. And I feel like the separation in the SEC from 1 through 10 is about as slim as I've ever seen it.
Yeah, it's wild that you put Arkansas outside of that category, which and
it's warranted.
Exactly. It is wild to think that is where they are in this conversation, but you're absolutely right. And yeah, I mean, this is kind of a season where, you look at some of these teams that are starting to make their ascent, and it feels like, there are 4 teams in particular: South Carolina, Ole Miss, Georgia, LSU. It feels like those 4 teams have really bounced around the bottom 4 over the past, several years here and there. But yet all those teams right now, they've all already got a couple wins in SEC play. I think that's what's made this very interesting, is that you're seeing what some of these teams that have kind of continued to be at the bottom, how they've kind of rebuilt their program this year and how they're all just kind of having success to this point. When you think about it, again, minus a Vanderbilt, who, on the flip side of that, we know Vanderbilt made a great run to be a top 5 team in the SEC last year. When you look at it from that standpoint, this is what we say every year. We would have never thought that definitely Arkansas. We would have never thought Arkansas would be where they are right now. Missouri, look, I expect them to take a little bit of a step back. It's been a little bit more challenging probably than even I thought it would be for them. It's just the nature of the SEC. Somebody's got to finish 1 through 14. And I think we're seeing right now, when you have programs that are making moves like Ole Miss, like South Carolina, Georgia, LSU's playing better now. You got to beat somebody. And so it just makes this conference a lot more interesting. And we'll see if teams can catch those maybe 3 to 4 teams at the top right now that feel like they could be starting to separate themselves a little bit. And that would be, Auburn, Tennessee, Kentucky, Alabama maybe. But again, this league is wild, and it's even wilder now that some of those teams at the bottom are making their way up.
Oh, there's no question about it. And we are recording this before we did see some of the results from Tuesday and Wednesday go down as well. But that said, we've got a lot of teams of intrigue, and just one team that I have a tough time being able to make heads or tails of, because it feels like every single time I'm out on them, it feels like they're reeling me back in. It is that Texas A&M team that I was alluding to a little bit before. And what are your overall expectations for a team that they entered in the week 10-6 going into that game against Arkansas? And for A&M, they've been as cold as an igloo from 3. But if you look at teams that have been like most unlucky in college basketball, I think Texas A&M would probably be right there at the top as well.
Look, skill-wise, what's been different about A&M to this point is, Tyrese Radford missed a bit of a stretch there. He's back now, and obviously we saw that on full display against Kentucky, where, he and Wade Taylor combined for 59 points, and he puts up 28 of those. They both almost play every minute of the game. And I think this is more of the Texas A&M we will probably see moving forward, is if Radford is consistently playing, which he wasn't for a while there, obviously they're a better team. Like, there's no question about it. And it's also important to note that I think when we had our expectations of A&M coming to the season, we also expected them to maybe be a little bit deeper in the front court too, with a Julius Marble added to the mix. But of course, he hasn't played this season. And, that is certainly given Henry Coleman, who else, Solomon Washington, Wilton Levesque, like all those guys are having to fill part of that void that Marble, again, played a significant role last year. And so I think it's just been a little bit of an adjustment in a couple different areas for A&M. We always say sometimes teams just sort of have to hit the bottom to start their way back up. And it feels like they kind of did that against LSU in that 15-point game they lost at home. The Auburn game was ugly, but they at least gave themselves a chance. I think that 11-point score line, a little bit deceiving in that one, because it felt like A&M was right there with the chance with a couple minutes to go. You get a big win over Kentucky. The problem, of course, again, people know by the time they listen to this, you have the 2 road games in Arkansas and LSU coming up. But I think A&M, to me, has a great opportunity here to try to kind of get things going back in the right direction, because it feels like the schedule is going to help them a little bit. They got 3 straight home games starting next week. I think this is where maybe we start to see A&M turn things around, because they're a team that I always pick on teams that cannot shoot the ball. They cannot shoot the ball. They really struggle from 3. But the good news is they're getting all of those offensive rebounds. And, they're one of the best offensive rebounding teams in the country. And so that's helping them be a little bit efficient offensively in a year where they're not as good defensively. You can pick your reasons why. I think one of the reasons why is, when you go back to last season, again, whether it's having a Marble or a Dexter Dennis, who was the best defender on that team, they've not really been able to make up for that. But I think the upside is there for A&M to be a team that finishes in the top 5 in the SEC. We'll just see if they can take advantage of the schedule.
Yep, it is going to be interesting to see how they do moving forward, because I do think that there's a little bit of upside there. And what else I think is going to be very puzzling is to see what we get moving forward. The 2 most upstart teams in the SEC, as well as Blake Lovell, who does such tremendous work over at Southeastern 14, is joining me on Coast to Coast Hoops. And I still remember doing our SEC preview earlier in the year, and I feel like we both settled on one thing with the SEC, that South Carolina was going to be right there at the bottom. And man, they entered into this week 14-2. They've really been executing well on offense. And I think that we both also settled on one thing as well. Ole Miss had the highest ceiling and the lowest floor of pretty much any team out there in the SEC. They started out the week 15-1 as well. Out of these two teams, which one do you think is more legit, and which one do you think can be able to keep this up a little bit more moving forward?
Yeah, it does feel like Ole Miss is just the more complete team of the two. I think the depth is really starting to stand out with Ole Miss, which, as we know, when we were having that conversation about their upside in the summer, it was with the thought that, okay, they're going to have Brendan Murray, they're going to have Musa Cisse. It's helped out now that they have both. It's not like both guys are scoring 20 a game or anything like that, but it's just having that depth and having the skill sets that both of those two bring to the table. It is significant for a team that I think the biggest story for Ole Miss, before Chris Beard was more of they had very little room for error, and they were one of the teams that had, so many injuries over the past several seasons, and they just could not afford that. Whereas this year, again, they've got more depth, and I think you're seeing that, and you're seeing, the emergence of what Allen Flanigan can be when he's fully healthy. He has been one of the most consistent players in the SEC, period, to this point, and that's made a huge difference. Matthew Morrell, we've always talked about him. He's a lot of upside, just a dynamic scorer. So I think Ole Miss is really starting to put it together, and I know that sounds maybe silly to say about a team that's 15-1, but, like I do, a lot of people jumped off the bandwagon after the Tennessee loss. They said, okay, maybe this is what Ole Miss is. But, I went to that game saying, hey, this is playing a game at Tennessee. We see what Tennessee does to teams defensively. Ole Miss had not seen anyone like that to this point in the season in terms of how they play defense. And now all they do is bounce back and have some pretty good performances since then. So I think this Ole Miss team, much better offensively than we thought they would be. They're a top 10 three-point shooting team, which I would have never imagined for this roster coming into the season. They're not a vintage Chris Beard defensive team. Maybe ultimately that's what holds them back from being, a potential threat in the NCAA tournament perhaps, and maybe they lose some games down the stretch that they shouldn't because of that. But I think because that offense has really picked it up, they take care of the ball, and they've got some studs on that roster. I think this is a team that I probably am willing to bet that I would not want to play come March, just based on what we kind of have seen from Chris Beard, how his teams improve. I think defensively they will get better. I don't want to take anything away from South Carolina either, Greg, because I think that's a team not maybe as deep as Ole Miss, maybe don't pack the offensive punch necessarily, but they're not bad defensively. They've gotten better on that side of the floor, and that's been the huge difference from last year where, it felt like they couldn't stop anybody last season. But this season, they don't have to be great offensively. They just have to be good because their defense is helping them out a little bit. And, they're going to play slower tempo and keep teams kind of, at their level. They're a team that already has a good win over Mississippi State in conference play. Their 2 losses on the season at Clemson, at Alabama. No shame in that. I don't know that they have, again, maybe the depth that an Ole Miss does to wind up even maybe getting to the NCAA tournament, although I think they've got a good shot. I do think these two teams, it is fascinating, Greg, based on the conversation we had in the summer.
Oh my gosh, it has been so interesting to take a look at these two teams, and it's just a landscape in college basketball in general that has been upside down here in the last few weeks. As joining me on the show, we do have Blake Lovell, who does such great work over at Southeastern 14, joining me on Coast to Coast Hoops, and this extends well beyond the SEC, but last week, as we know, we saw all sorts of chaos with having 4 of the top 5 teams in college basketball go down within a 72-hour time span. And this is for both the SEC and just what you're seeing all across college basketball. What has been really your thesis as to why we have been seeing so much craziness, and just how do you view the NCAA landscape in general? Because I take a look at things, and much like we were talking about the SEC being as tight as we can remember it in terms of 1 through 10, I take a look at the Pac-12, and aside from Arizona, outside of them, pretty much all these teams of the Pac-12 are very tight. You take a look at the Big 12, it's always a bloodbath, and I feel like what we're seeing in the SEC, sans a few conferences like the Big Ten with a Purdue, it just feels like it's this way all across college basketball, where the separation from like team number 2 in a conference is as thin as ever between they and team like number 10.
Yeah, I think it's, very clear. When we started the transfer portal era, even NIL, I think to a certain extent, when we started, we knew there were going to be things that, maybe immediately we would not see how the changes, we wouldn't see the full effect of the changes for maybe several years down the road. I think this is where we're starting to see some of that, and that you're just seeing how rosters can be built to compete with those teams that it felt like for years, right? It was just a different era where you knew that these specific group of teams, maybe it was a group of 10, 12, whatever, they were going to get the best players. They were always going to get the players that were the best, whether it was recruiting, anything. It's just the way it worked. Since then, though, it's just as the landscape has changed, there's more opportunity. Players can go elsewhere. They can play more. They can get, again, potential NIL money more elsewhere. And there's not that big of a difference anymore, that separates the North Carolinas, the Dukes, the Kansases, all those teams that we just talk about for the longest time, just being the teams that were always going to be there. And you just felt like it was never going to change. Look, we're seeing it during the season. We saw it during the NCAA tournament last year. I mean, there are just so many other teams that have found a way to build their rosters effectively to the point to where they can be competitive within their own conference, nationally, all of those things. And, listen, if I were one of those teams, first thing I would do based on what we've seen recently, I'd go to my conference commissioner and say, please don't make us play a road game again, because teams having to go on the road in conference play, that's nothing new. But it's definitely been something this season where we see, again, what's kind of happening with some of these top teams. And so it makes for a much more, I think, entertaining landscape, because you do have so many teams out there now that have multiple losses. And I feel like there have been some years, Greg, where we go into this and we're like, all right, that team's got one loss. Maybe someone's still undefeated. I don't know. You look up across the board and you're like, hey, everybody's got kind of multiple losses at this point in terms of those top tier teams. And so I'd be surprised if, they don't pick up a couple more here as we move forward. I don't think you're going to see a lot of teams out there, going 30-2 and those kind of records this year, just based on how we're seeing some of these conferences play out. So it makes for a much more entertaining road to the NCAA tournament, because we know chaos is going to ensue once you get there. But, man, it's going to be tough to kind of identify those teams that should be at the top. Or maybe it's just as simple as saying, hey, UConn won it all last year. They're on quite a run this year. Let's just bank on UConn at this point. So
first time in over a decade that UConn was number one in the polls entering this week, and they were the only of the top 5 teams from last week that didn't stub their toe, so it was hard to disagree there. And Blake, I always love asking you this question, so we're going to do it once again. When it comes to the landscape of college basketball, pick one or two teams out there outside of the SEC. Who are you taking a look at right now that over the last few weeks you've either become a little bit more stock up on or perhaps a little bit more stock down on as you've been seeing them a bit more?
It's always fun, this exercise is, Greg, because I'm always trying to figure out, all right, who are the teams that I haven't talked about before that we can bring up here? But I will say there's one team in particular. New Mexico is a very interesting team to me. Now, I know, again, we talk about losing games in conference play on the road, right? It's like, well, they lost a couple games on the road to start off with. They lost to Colorado State, lost to UNLV and all that. But obviously, you see what they did to San Diego State last week. And I talk about defensive teams because we always say, like, teams that can win games in the future, you kind of see how their defense travels and those kind of things. Again, maybe to do the best of it in those couple road games. But that's at least, I'll say, I don't know exactly where I stand on New Mexico right now, but I will say they're kind of a team I have my eye on. I'm very curious. We know they play an up-tempo style, and I'm curious just to see how the rest of this looks for them the rest of the way in the Mountain West. Elsewhere, I'm going to go back to, I feel like this is one over the years that I've kind of always gone back to, but I think really just seeing them now, and again, this is another one where by the time maybe people listen to this, we'll see how they fare in a couple of road games they have this week. I always watch how Baylor plays. It just, to me, goes back to a team that the way Scott Drew coaches, and you see what this team can do offensively, obviously, you can see the three-point numbers. They'll wow you. Defensively, they're better than they were last year. We know that for sure. Maybe still a couple things that they can do better, but I just still have my eye on Baylor, and I always do, again, with Scott Drew, just because you know how he coaches. Like, you can see the improvement, how they get better in certain areas throughout the year, and now you just kind of look up and see where they're at this point. And like I said, even if they were to lose one of these road games this week, I still think Baylor's a team that's got a lot of upside, obviously size, they've got experience. They shoot it so well, don't really beat themselves as usual. They're a really good offensive rebounding team. I really continue to keep my eye on this Baylor team because I think they've got a lot of upside. So
I do think that they've got a ton of upside, and there's always upside on this podcast when you're aboard, Blake, because you do an absolutely incredible job taking a look at this game that we all know and love of college basketball. It is at times very, very hard to take a look at, and yet you're able to make sense out of the senseless. You do such a good job being able to decipher all that we're getting. So let the good people at home know what's all on tap for you, and how people are able to follow along on social media and other platforms.
Yeah, I always appreciate it, Greg. Like you said, you can find all of our stuff SEC-wise on YouTube at Southeastern 14. We have all our SEC basketball stuff there, and everything else, you can follow me on Twitter at the Blake Lovell.
And Blake does such an incredible job taking a look at this game that we all know and love of college basketball. It is sometimes one that is maddening. It is sometimes one that doesn't make sense, but at the same time, Blake, He's able to cut through it all. He's able to give us great insights as to what we're all seeing in the SEC and really the entirety of all of college basketball. A big thanks to Blake for joining me on Coast to Coast Hoops, now part of the VSiN family podcast. And coming up next, it is that time of the podcast. I give you picks and analysis on every game on the betting board for this college basketball Thursday as we hit some big shots. And we're back here in lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Hoops Peterson, now part of the VSiN family podcast. It is always great to be joined by Blake Lovell. He does such excellent work over there at Southeastern 14. Taking a look at this tremendous game of college basketball. It certainly has been a fun year out there in the SEC. Blake does a great job covering it all. On top of that, I know he's doing an amazing job outside the SEC. Just taking a look at the landscape of college basketball. He always does a great job when every single time, whenever he joins me, we take a look at the broad picture, and Blake just does absolutely impeccable work. So big thanks to him for joining me in the last segment. Now it is that time of the podcast. I give you picks and analysis on every game on the betting board for this college basketball Thursday as we hit some bank shots.
Most financial establishments close at a certain time, but not here. It is time for a side and total on every game on today's betting board bank shots.
Do note that, as per usual, any changes that are made to these plays will be listed up on my Twitter feed at GNet_81, and we're going to be going in the Las Vegas rotation order. This is where we go with the games with 3 digits on the rotation first, then the games with 6 digits. They involve smaller conferences. Those are going to be the games at the bottom. This will mainly be the Northeast Conference, the America East. I think we've got a Southland game or two. The SWAC, the MEAC would be down here. We don't have any of those 2 conferences. If I didn't say the Big South, and the Atlantic Sun, those are going to be the games at the bottom. So let's get things started with 7:45, 7:46 on the betting board. It is Michigan State. They play host to Minnesota State with the smallest strengths in the union. Minnesota finds themselves as an underdog of 12 points. Your total on this game is 143. Certainly when you see a 10-7 team being a double-digit favorite against a Minnesota team that's covered all but 3 games this far this season, that does raise some alarm bells, and I don't think that Minnesota is going to be able to continue what they've done in the Big Ten thus far, but I do think that we're still overvaluing Michigan State just a little bit. At some point, you are what your record says that you are. I set my line at 11. I'm going to be willing to take the 12 with Minnesota. Now, for Minnesota, defense, it does suffer quite a bit of a drop-off when they're away from home. They're giving up more than 14 points more per 100 possessions in a road/shoot-record environment rather than at home. And for Michigan State, over the last 45 days, they have been shooting just below 40% from three-point range after they had a brutal start to the season. So they're starting to round into form. It is a Michigan State team that really does like to push the air out of the ball as well. They're outside the top 225 in terms of total possessions per game, a top 50 defense in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. And for Michigan State, they've actually done a relatively solid job being able to generate turnovers, a top 75 team in all of college basketball with regards to turnovers forced on a per possession basis. And this is a Minnesota team that has recently really been struggling with their three-point shot, and they do go up against a Michigan State team that's allowing opponents to shoot 39.7% on 2-point shots when they're at home. That's one of the best marks in all of college basketball, but Minnesota's actually good with their interior defense as well. They're a top 50 team with regards to opponents' 2-point shooting percentage, so I do think that this is going to be a little bit of a lower scoring game. I did set my total at a 141. I think that both of these teams are a little bit sneaky on the defensive side of things, and this has been a Michigan State team that has really relied upon Ty Walker for all their offense. He's been able to supply the team with about 20 points per contest for a Michigan State team that they're about 52nd in the country in terms of points scored on a per possession basis, while Minnesota's 58th. Big thanks to Elijah Hawkins for that. Hawkins is in the top 3 nationally in terms of assists per game. He has done so while cutting down on the turnovers. Last year, while he was at Howard, led the country in turnovers on a per possession basis. This season, he has been able to cut that down to more like 2.8 turnovers per game. Dawson Garcia is able to give you north of 15 points per contest, has been a solid rebounder for the team. Now, with Minnesota, the one fear that you do have to have with this team is that they sometimes are going to give up the arc. This is a team that's allowing opponents in a roadside shoot-record environment to shoot 39% from 3, and for Michigan State, it's not a supreme team on the glass, so Mady Sissoko has been able to improve as the season's gone along, about 6.8 rebounds per game, but it's all about, can you get Malik Hall, Jaden Akins to be able to get going. Akins now shooting about 38.5% from 3, and Trey Hallman, he's been able to shoot north of 40% from 3, only giving you 6 points per contest, and some of these guys like Joseph Joseph for Minnesota being able to supply about 11 points per contest, shooting 48% from 3, and as a matter of fact, of your top 4 scorers for Minnesota, 3 of them do shoot at least 38.5% from 3. I do think that you just get those ancillary productions to be able to help Minnesota hold in this game. I think there's going to be a little bit of regression with with their offense with this being a road game, and I do think that's going to be a slow down slog. So set my total 141, looking at the under. And I do think that Michigan State wins this game and does so quite handily, but I think we've went too far. I'm going to be willing to take the 12 in Minnesota, still a top 5 team with regards to cover 8. I'm going to be willing to ride with the Golden Gophers again and going with the under. 747, 748 on the betting board is UNC Wilmington on the road facing off against Elon. Elon is a home underdog of 8 points. Total is between 150.5 and 151. Did set my total 149. I'm going to be taking a look at this total under. Wilmington's defense has really fallen off from what it has been in past years. This Wilmington team is getting torched from 3-point range. They're in second in the country in terms of opponents' 3-point shooting percentage, but after a very hot start from 3-point range to begin the season, Elon is starting to see a little bit of regression with that regard, and I could see a little bit of regression when it comes to this UNC Wilmington team as well. I did set my number at 7, so I'm going to be willing to take 8 with Elon. Elon is about 170th in the country with regards to their opponent's 3-point shooting percentage, and it is an Elon team that leaves quite a bit of something to be desired on the glass. Sam Sherry, only guy in the roster that gives you north of 5 boards per contest, but when it comes to Elon, you do have some very balanced scoring. Out of your top 5 scorers, 4 of them do shoot at least 39.4% from 3-point range. Again, I do think we're going to see some regression here, but you've been able to get a lot out of Rob Higgins, the transfer from St. Francis of Brooklyn. About 3 assists, 41% 3-point shooter, 12 points per contest, and it is not going to compare to the top scorer of UNC Wilmington, Terzarian White, 20.5 points, 6.5 boards, 36.5% 3-point shooter for a Wilmington team that just does a really good job of not beating themselves. Top 10 team nationally in terms of fewest turnovers on a per possession basis. You've been able to have a lot of guys around them, like a KJ Jenkins, shoot about 38% from 3-point range. Nick Farrar is continuing to shoot 47.5% from 3-point range. It has been rather ridiculous, and what else is ridiculous is Elon's defense. They are about 340th in all of college basketball in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. That has been rather rough, and for this Wilmington team, it does feel like they're rounding into a little bit of better form with regards to their defense, giving up 67 or fewer in 2 out of their last 3 games, and it has been a team that's seen a little bit of a slowdown with their offense. They've been held below 70 points in 3 out of their last 4 games. It is an Elon team that they themselves scored 70 points or fewer in 3 out of their 4 games since the turn of the new year, so they've been regressing a little bit as well. I think that both of these teams just rely so much on the 3 ball that with them starting to see a little bit of a downtick with that regard, it is going to cause for a little bit of a lower scoring game. These are 2 mid-tempo teams, and with this Elon team, while they don't necessarily do an amazing job on the glass, I do think that they're going to hold in this game because it is a UNC Wilmington team that they themselves, they don't have a lot of rebounding outside of Tarzarian White, so I do think that that is actually going to be to the advantage of Elon. If you take a look at overall rebound rate, this is a UNC Wilmington team that they are clocking in right in the neighborhood of about 274, so I think that that's going to be a nice equalizer for an Elon team that they themselves have a little bit of a tough time down low. So did set my number at 7. I'm going to be willing to take 8 with Elon, and did set my total 149, so looking at the under, and I'm going to be taking a look at those points with Elon. 749, 750 on the betting board. College of Charleston plays host to Towson. Towson is an underdog of 9 to 10 points. Total on this game is anywhere between 140.5 and 141. Did set Towson as an underdog of 8.5 points. I'm going to be willing to take 9 plus here with them. Towson, bottom 25 team in terms of total possessions per game, and a team that is legitimately a top 20 team in terms of their rebound rate. Now they've got Nenda Tark in the fold. He actually led all of college basketball in terms of steals per game a few seasons ago. 2021-22 campaign was able to generate 3 steals, 7 boards, 13.5 points per game while he was over at Campbell and has given this team a real boost recently. How about 6 steals and 15 points per game over the last 3 games. The 6 steals, that's total steals, and the points per game, that's just on average, but still, he's been able to do a nice job with that regard. You've got Charles Thompson down low. He's able to give you 8 plus rebounds per game. Should be able to win the battle down low against Ante Brazovic. He's been able to give you about 6.5 boards, 11.5 points per game, and it's a Charleston team that they just haven't had the same shooting this year as they have in past years. Rain Smith has been able to rein it in, shooting 38% from 3-point range, 11.5 points per contest, but this is a Charleston team that isn't doing the same job on the glass as they have in past years. Typically, this is a team that ranks in the top 50 with regards to overall offensive rebound rate. Now, this is both offensive and defensive rate combined in this, but for College of Charleston, just 176th in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. Much of that is due to the fact that in terms of their rebound rate, they are clocking in right in the neighborhood about 96, so we've seen a little bit of a fall off there. It is a bunch that has just been very inconsistent with regards to having that main ball handler. You've had CJ Fulton give you about 4 assists per contest, but he's only giving you about 4.5 points per game, hasn't necessarily been able to spark this offense. Meanwhile, it's a Towson team that He certainly have been looking for a little bit of direction as well, but Dylan Williamson give you about 3 assists per contest. That has been really rock solid for a Towson team that they just continue to hold up on defense. For Towson, they have now given up 67 points or fewer in each of their last 5 games, and for that matter, this is a Towson team that they've allowed north of 71 points just twice since their opening night of the season, so 14 out of their last 16 games. It is a Charleston team that they themselves have gotten to at least 80 points in 4 out of their last 5 games, but I do think that this is going to be a case where we are going to see the Towson defense hold up. It's a Charleston team that they themselves have allowed 62 or fewer in 3 out of their last 5 games, so in a situation of something's got to give, I do lean toward the points with Towson. I did set my line at an 8.5, and I do think that this is going to be a game that is going to be just close enough for late game following. Towson getting a little bit of a nice boost offensively from Nenda Tark, so I did set my total at 142.5. I'm going to be taking a look at the over in this spot, and I'm going to be taking a look at those points with Towson, set them as an 8.5 point dog. 751, 752 on the betting board. Wright St is going to be playing with UW Green Bay. Green Bay is an underdog of 8.5 points. 152.5 to 153 is your total, and set my total at a 154. I am looking at the over. This is a Wright St team that they play fast, but they don't play at warp speed. They're just below the top 70 in terms of total possessions per game. But boy, this team is getting cooked offensively. In terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, Wright State 344th nationally against the UW Green Bay team that they themselves seen a little bit of regression with this regard. They're right around about 200th, but all of a sudden, UW Green Bay is putting the biscuit in the basket. They've got their main scorer, Noah Reynolds, who's legitimately been one of the best mid-major players in all of college basketball this year. 19 points, 4.5 assists. He's shooting 39% from 3. All of a sudden, UW Green Bay is averaging about 35% three-point shooting percentage across the board, and for UW Green Bay, this team has gotten to at least 69 points in 4 of their last 5 games, and they go up against a Wright St team that they are just giving up points upon points upon points. This team has allowed at least 76 points against Division I opponents. I do have to make that moniker because they have played against quite a few non-D1 teams in all but one of their games since the beginning of the month of December, and for that matter, they have given up at least 74 points against D1 opponents in all but 2 games thus far this season. With UW Green Bay, all of a sudden, they're getting Foster Wonder in the fold, who's been able to shoot 40% from 3-point range. For that matter, for UW Green Bay, each of their top 4 scorers are shooting at least 37.2% from 3-point range. You're getting a little bit of something down low out of Elijah Jones. Now, they're most likely going to be losing that battle to this Wright St team. You've got A.J. Brown down low. He's been able to give you about 7 or so rebounds per game, has some versatility, double-figure amount of points, and for Wright State, you do have Tanner Holden, Trey Calvin. These 2 guys have been able to combine for just under 37 points per contest. You've got both of these guys shooting in that realm about 43.5 to 44% from 3-point range, so that is going to be hurting a UW Green Bay team that I think is going to lose a battle on the glass. Green Bay about 137th in the country with regards to overall rebound rate. Wright State is more around 110th, but I do think that UW Green Bay is going to be able to hold in this game. It is a Wright State team that has been a little bit all over the place. Brandon Noel, 13.5 points, shoots 38.5% from 3-point range, but doesn't necessarily have too much of a bench. Do like the way that UW Green Bay has been coming to the forefront with so much of this. I did set my line at 8, so here at an 8.5, I'm going to be looking at the points. I think that there might be a possibility of some late game felling, and certainly I think that Wright State is going to be able to score their points. They've gotten to at least 80 in 4 out of their last 5 games, and they just keep on giving it up. So set my total 154, looking at the over, and we'll take north of 8 here with Green Bay. 753, 754 on the betting board. Campbell, it's a road to face off against William. You don't just get William, you don't just get Mary, but you get both. I think I just called it William instead of William and Mary the first time around, but that said, you get the tag team, and they're laying between 3.5 and 4 points at home against Campbell with a total between 134 and 134.5. Now, if it were just William, I would not be willing to lay the points here, but that said, now that we've got Mary in the fold, I'm going to be willing to lay 6.5. 2 on 5 is fair. 1 on 5, we just can't do it, but that said, I did set William and Mary as a 6.5 point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay the number, and when it comes to this William and Mary team, defense, not the forte of this team. They are outside the top 345 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, getting just completely tattooed from 3-point range, but got a Campbell team that they really don't put the ball in the basket. This Campbell team is collective. They're shooting 32.5% from 3-point range. Campbell's super slow team, bottom 25 in terms of total possessions per game. You've got a William and Mary team that's also super duper slow. Now, with this Campbell team, you've got Laurinaitis Vitritis, who's been able to give you about 10.5 points, 2.5 assists. He's starting to help out this team a a little bit as Anthony Deloroso has had to do a little bit of everything, sealing half 17 points, 6 boards, shooting about 32% from three-point range, and Vistreas has been able to shoot about 44% from three. I can't say his last name for the life of me, but that said, when it comes to William and Mary, you just have a little bit more from the outside, like what Trey Moss, Gabe Dorsey are able to do. Both are giving you 13.4 points per contest, and with Dorsey, he has been able to shoot it at a clip of 40% from three-point range. Injury to Noah Collier has led to this William and Mary team being very rough in terms of the glass. They are a team that is now outside the top 175 with regards to overall rebound rate, but it's not like this Campbell team is doing anything amazing on the glass themselves at 279th. So this is a William and Mary team that I think is going to be able to hold up there. You've been able to get right around about 6 rebounds, 11.5 points out of Chase Lowe as well. So he's been able to step up for the team. And with William and Mary, the lifeblood of this team is being able to just have good flowing offense, not turning the ball over. They do face off against a Campbell team that, when they're at home, they're an amazing three-point shooting defense. On the road, they're very ordinary. They're allowing opponents to shoot 33.9% from three-point range in a road/neutral court environment. That's average, it's slightly above average. At home, that's 26.8%. So with this game being at the campus of William and Mary, I think that that's very big, as they themselves allow opponents to shoot north of 38% from three, but that three-point shooting percentage drops to 32.8% for opponents when they are at home. So I think that that is going to be very paramount in this spot. It is a William and Mary team that they don't really force any turnovers whatsoever. You can't be expecting a lot of that. So I think that there's going to be clean possessions on both sides. But with this Campbell team having their issues just being able to hit the glass, just having anyone outside of Deloroso be able to give you much scoring, I think that the more well-rounded William and Mary team is going to be able to step up here. I did set William and Mary as a 6.5 point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay the number in with this total, even though you got two super duper slow teams. These are two teams that are just getting absolutely destroyed on defense, with William and Mary 360th in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, and this is a Campbell team that they're right around about 160th, but they themselves have been having some lesser results, and they've gotten to at least 70 points in now 4 out of their last 7 games. So I'm going to be taking a look at the over in this spot. I did set my total more around a 138.5. I do think that you could get some late game fouling in this spot, so looking over and looking at William and Mary laying the number 755, 756 on the betting board. Wichita State hits the road face off against Florida Atlantic. Florida Atlantic, a 14 to a 14.5 point favorite, with your total between 152.5 and 153.5. And for Florida Atlantic, I did set them as a favorite of 14 points. I think we're just a little bit too lofty here. I'm going to be willing to take 14.5 with Wichita State. Wichita State certainly has been sliding a little bit with regards to their defense, but this is still a bunch that should be able to do a solid job on the glass against a Florida Atlantic team that is outside the top 100 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis as well. For Florida Atlantic, when they were make the Final Four last season, they were a top 40 team in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, and Vladislav Golden giving you 14 points, 6 boards, just under 2 blocks per contest. He's been able to do a pretty rock solid job for this team, but outside of him, rebounding has not been great. It's a Florida Atlantic team that's right around about 57th in the country with regards to rebound rate. Meanwhile, you do have a Wichita State team that they're more around 71st, so I do think that they're going to be able to hold up here. You've got Kenny Poto, who's been able to give you 7 rebounds per game, and then Dallin Original, Quincy Ballard. They've been able to combine for 14 rebounds, 14.5 points per game between the two of them. The big thing for Wichita State is that they're going to need to knock down a few outside shots. They're only shooting about 32.5% from three-point range with Wichita State. Three-point shooting defense hasn't been great, hasn't been terrible. They're about 125th in all of college basketball in terms of opponents' effective field goal shooting percentage, and then when it comes to the opponent's three-point shooting percentage, they have been able to put it on lockdown a little bit more on the road rather than at home. For Wichita State, 127th in all of college basketball with regards to opponents' three-point shooting percentage, with opponents shooting less than 33% off of them in a road/neutral court environment. Meanwhile, for Florida Atlantic, they're outside the top 175 in terms of opponents' three-point shooting percentage. They're currently clocking in now 168th. That was because UAB just couldn't hit anything to save their lives in the previous game, but that said, they still have been getting gashed quite a bit from the outside. It has been the John L. Davis show for this Florida Atlantic team. He's been able to do a nice job giving you 16.5 points per contest, shooting north of 40% from three-point range. Elijah Martin has been able to do a nice job of being that Robin scorer with about 12.5 points. He shoots in the mid-30s from three-point range, and getting back Nick Boyd, that should be able to help this team out as well, but it is also a Florida Atlantic team that in a closeout spot with regards to the cover, they shoot 69.5% at the free throw line, something to be cautious of, and Kobe Rogers supplying 16 points for Wichita State team that, yes, it has been a rough go of it for them. They have lost 5 straight games, but sans that Memphis game, that was just a complete and utter outlier. They have allowed fewer than 70 points in now 4 of their last 5 games, with the exception coming against Kansas, and this is a Florida Atlantic team that is yet to cover in American Conference play. They've been able to get a lot of outright wins, but they have given up north of 70 points in now 4 of their last 5 games, so good old situation of something's got to give here. I did set my total total at a 154. So seeing the 153.5, I'm going to be looking at the over. I think north of 14 will take those points with Wichita State. 757, 758 on the betting board. UW Milwaukee, it's a road face-off against Northern Kentucky. The Norse find themselves as 3.5 to 4-point home favorites. Totals between 154.5 and 155. I did set my total at a 152, so I'm going to be looking at the under. UW Milwaukee overall this season has been a mid-tempo team, but they have really cranked up their tempo ever since BJ Turn-It-Up Freeman has come back in the fold for this team. Was the team's top scorer last year, averaging right around about 18 to 19 points per contest, and he's been really coming off the bench in the last few games for the team, and he's just been a microwave scorer. 18.5 points, 6.5 boards, 3.5 assists. I don't know why they're bringing him in off the bench, and he does a great job of keeping everyone in the game, as he has been really turning the ball over a lot. Ever since he came back in the fold, his 4 games back, he has put up 21 turnovers. He is right now leading all of college basketball in the time span that he has been back in the fold in terms of turnovers, but has supplied 14 plus points in every one of these games, and it has caused for UW Milwaukee to really crank up the tempo. Now, they're going up against a Northern Kentucky team that's outside the top 320 in terms of total possessions per game. They are getting cooked on defense. They are outside the top 200 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. In Northern Kentucky, a team that's well outside the top 200 with regards to rebound rate. You don't have anyone other than Trey Robinson giving you north of 5.2 rebounds per game, 9.5 points, 5.5 boards out of him. And for the North, they're just not shooting it well from three-point range, 30.6% from distance. I do like the game of St. Vincent. He's able to give you about 17 points, north of 2 steals, 5 boards. He's a nice stat sheet sufferer. And then Marquise Warwick is able to give you 18 plus points per contest, but for Northern Kentucky, they do give up the arc when they're at home. They're allowing opponents to shoot well north of 34.9% from three-point range at home, 214th in all of college basketball. With that regarded, UW Milwaukee has been a rough defense all season long. They are outside the top 325 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. They're allowing opponents to shoot right around 37% from three-point range overall, but it actually falls to about 35.5% in a road/shooting court environment. And in a game that is going to be slowed down, in a game where UW Milwaukee is turning the ball over left and right, in Northern Kentucky, they are turning the ball over 13 times per game as well. Now, Northern Kentucky, a top 40 team in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis, I do think that that's going to cause for some sloppiness. So I did set my total at a 152. I'm looking at the under. I'm still going to be willing to lay it with Northern Kentucky, though, because UW Milwaukee is only shooting 32% from three themselves with BJ Freeman. While he's been putting up those offensive numbers, the turnovers are a big, giant concern with him. And outside of Mr. Freeman, you don't have a single guy that gives you north of 4.8 rebounds per game. Cantrell Pulley and Eric Pratt been able to combine for about 24.5 points per game. But this just feels like a disjointed and strange UW Milwaukee team. Fully recognize that they've won 4 of their last 5 games. Feels very smoke and mirrors right now, though, with them giving up 75 plus 4 of their last 5 games. And one of those wins came against Detroit Mercy. So that needs to be taken into account as well. And I do think that this is going to be a game that's going to be slowed down a little bit to the liking of the North, which helps them out. I did set my line at 6. I'm going to be willing to lay it with Northern Kentucky, set my total 152, so also looking under. 759, 760 on the betting board. Morehead St plays us UT Martin. UT Martin is an underdog of 9.5 to 10 points. 153 to 154 is your total, and with UT Martin, I did set them as an underdog of 8.5 points, so being able to get 9 plus, I'm going to be willing to take those points. It's a UT Martin squad that certainly has been having all sorts of issues with regards to their defense, but offensively, this team has been able to click, and they're playing at warp speed. They are a top 10 team in all of college basketball in terms of total possessions per game, and they've got a pair of guys in Jordan Cruz along with Jordan Sears who have been exceptional scorers. They are combining for 37.5 points per game, both shooting north of 43% from three-point range, and with the tempo of UT Martin, 12.5 turnovers per game is honestly not too bad, and they go up against a Morehead St team that's looking to slow you down. Morehead St, once again, outside the top 225 in terms of total possessions per game, and for Morehead St, this is a team that, once again, is actually doing a very good job of guarding the three-point arc, except at home. For Morehead St, they're allowing opponents to shoot 28.5% from three-point range when they're in a roadside-shooting court environment, 36.5% from three-point range at home. And this is a UT Martin team that they themselves can get gassed with regards to allowing threes when they're at home. They're allowing opponents to shoot 41.5% from distance at home. That actually falls at 30.8% when they're away from home as well. So I do think that this actually bodes very well for UT Martin, especially going up against a Morehead St team that they're well outside the top 225 in terms of ball security. This is a Morehead St team that, while they do a nice job being able to shoot about 34.5% from three, they do turn the ball over 12.5 times per contest, being as low tempo as they are. That's a little bit of an issue. They should be able to win the battle down low. Out of your top 6 scorers, 5 of them are supplying north of 4.2 rebounds per game. 4 of them give you at least 5.7 rebounds per game. Riley Minix has been your main man, 18.6 plus rebounds per game, but someone like an Eddie Ricks III has been able to give you 7 points, 5.5 rebounds per game. You've got Jordan Latham, Khalil Thomas. These 2 guys have been able to really help flow the offense with a combined 28 points. points, 11 boards, and then Drew Thelwell has been your main trigger man, 6 assists, and 2.1 turnovers per game for Lathan and Thomas, by the way, both shoot about 39% from three-point range, and I do think that Morehead St going to be able to win that battle on the glass. It is a UT Martin team that does have Isa Muhammad, who's been able to give you north of 6 rebounds per game, so he should be able to do a relatively solid job there, but for UT Martin, they're about a league average team in terms of their rebounding, 173rd in all of college basketball. Meanwhile, this is a Morehead St team that, with all their balanced rebounding options, they're a team that's clocking in 35th, so that's going to be a little bit of an issue. Should be quite a few second chances for Morehead St, but Morehead St not really generating a lot of turnovers, so that should allow for a lot of clean looks for this UT Martin team, and I do think that UT Martin, a team that has actually been able to improve a little bit with their defense. It doesn't sound like much, but 73 points of fear surrendered in 3 out of their last 4 games is pretty good for their tempo, and you've got a Morehead St team that they themselves have actually scored 78 plus points in 4 of their last 5 games. I do think that you're going to get a little bit more of an up and down game than what Morehead St is used to. I did set my total though at a 150.5. I think we've just went a little bit too far, especially with Morehead St giving up fewer than 70 points in each of their last 5 games, but I do think the UT Martin hangs in there. We'll take 9 plus here with UT Martin and taking a look at this total under 761, 762 on the betting board. Georgia Southern plays those to Coastal Carolina. Coastal Carolina is an underdog of 2.5 points. Total on this game is 150.5. So Coastal Carolina as an underdog of 2.5 points. So this is currently right on my number. I'm seeing a few 2s out there, and at a 2, I'd be willing to lay it with Georgia Southern. And man, I'm not willing to lay anything more than with Georgia Southern, as this has been one of the most brutal teams in all of college basketball. But I do feel like they were a little bit unlucky to start out the year. They've had a lot of guys be in and out of the fold due to injury, and they have now found that go-to scorer. That'd be Tyron Moore, who has been able to give you more. 14.5 points, 2.5 assists on 41% three-point shooting, and it's a Georgia Southern team that they do shoot about 34.5% from three-point range. Team that's been looking to crank up the tempo. The 13-plus turnovers per game has been a little bit unsightly, along with the fact that they just cannot guard the arc to save their lives. For Georgia Southern, they are allowing opponents to shoot 36.8% from three-point range and 40.3% when they are at home. The problem is this is also a Coastal Carolina team as well outside the top 225 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. But Coastal Carolina, the one thing that they do on defense, they guard the arc. Opponents are shooting 27.7% from three-point range in a road/neutral court environment. You've got Gianna Ojiaka, who comes over from George Mason. He's been able to give the team 8+ rebounds per game, so he's been able to lock it down there. You've got quite a bit of versatility with someone like Kevin Easley, who began his career over at TCU, Duquesne, Chattanooga. I think that he also played for the Harlem Globetrotters. He's been able to give the team like 9 points, 5 boards. He's got some relatively good versatility for a Coastal Carolina team that has honestly been a little bit better on the road than they have been at home in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. Coastal Carolina overall for the season is clocking in 277th, but they're allowing 9.4 points fewer per 100 possessions when they are away from home. Kylan Blackman has been able to give you about 13 points per contest. Problem for Coastal Carolina is that they don't execute the little things. They shoot 62.5% at the free throw line. They turn the ball over 13.5 times per game. You have been able to get 38.5% three-point shooting with 13 points per game out of Jacob Meyer, but I do think that those little things are going to be costly against the Georgia Southern team that, despite the fact that they do have their bad record, they do a little bit of better job with the fundamentals. And for Coastal Carolina, they themselves have been all over the place with regards to their offense. In their last 5 games, they have scored 65, 71, 77, 45, and 79 points. So it's certainly been all around the world for them, and this is a Georgia Southern team that I think is going to be able to do just enough on defense to be able to get the job done. So I'm going to be looking to lay 2 or less here with Georgia Southern, and I did set my total at a 152.5. I do think that this is going to be a nip-and-tuck game, could lead to some late-game fouling in both of these defenses. I've been outside the top 250 all season long, and both teams somewhat up tempo. So looking at the over, and I'm going to be willing to lay up to 2 with Georgia Southern, 763, 764 on the betting board. Hofstra plays us Hampton. Hampton is an underdog of 17.5 to 18.5 points. 147 to 147.5 is your total. Set my line at a 17.5. So here at 18 plus, I am going to be willing to take the points with Hampton. I have to think that Hampton is going to get a little bit more out of Jordan Nesbitt moving forward, as Jordan Nesbitt started out the year injured. After last year, he was able to give the team 12 plus points, north of 6 rebounds per game, was really their top guy and just has not been himself this far this season. He's still logging sub at 9 points per contest. Hasn't necessarily been able to hit the boards that he has in past seasons, but that said, it does feel like he's starting to turn it around just a little bit. The turnovers have been a little bit unsightly as well. He's had north of 2.5 turnovers per game in recent games, but that said, a combined 32 points, 14 rebounds, and 9 assists in the last 2 games with just 3 turnovers. So that is something that you do like to see out of him. You've got down low someone in Kyrie Smolin who's been able to give you 9.5 rebounds per game. It is a Hampton team that is certainly outside the top 250 in terms of rebound rate, but it's not like this Hofstra team has any sort of size whatsoever. Jaco Fritz is a 6'10", a little bit of a combo player that's able to give you a few boards, but Hofstra's right now 306th in the country with regards to rebound rate, so Hampton is not going to get destroyed there. You've got Tedrick Wilcox, you've got Tristan Maxwell, a pair of guys combining for about 21 points per contest, with Maxwell shooting about 37.5% from three-point range. It is a Hofstra team that certainly is the much more efficient offense. They only turn the ball over 10.5 times per contest. We've got a pair of guys in Tyler Thomas, Elon Charleston Dunbar. They've been able to combine for just under 41 points per contest, with both shooting north of 38.5% from three-point range. And then Yaquan Carlos, 6.5 assists, 2.9 turnovers per game. Love what he's been able to bring to the table, but it's a very top-heavy Hofstra team. Outside of your main five, you're not getting a whole heck of a lot of production out of anyone else. Silas Sunday, who's a 7-footer, has not been able to give you a lot on the glass, and while it is a Hampton team that's currently riding an 8-game losing streak, at the very least, this offense has been able to get a little bit more since Jordan Nesbitt has been able to pick things up, coming off of an 80-point performance against North Carolina A&T. Now, they've given up 80-plus points for their last 5 games. Meanwhile, it's a Hampton squad that they are going up against a bunch in Hofstra that has failed to get past the 68-point plateau in 3 out of their last 4 games, and they've been scuffling on offense. So it is a good old situation of something's got to give, and I did set my line at 17.5. Getting 18-plus here with Hampton, I'm going to be taking a look at the points, and when it comes to the total, set mine at a 145.5 with the way that Hofstra has been scuffling on offense, and Hofstra outside the top 200 in terms of total possessions per game. So going to be diving in on the under, and we'll take 18-plus here with Hampton. 765, 766 on the betting board. Memphis plays host to South Florida. South Florida does find themselves as an underdog of 13 points. Totals between 157 and 158.5, and I did set Memphis as a 10-point favorite. I'm going to be willing to take the 13 with South Florida. Memphis had a tremendous performance over the weekend against Wichita State, but they've had a lot of close calls in conference play, including having to go to overtime against UTSA. They needed that last-second buzzer beater against Tulsa as well, so they've been flirting with some danger recently, and this is a South Florida team that, if you look at them overall for the season, the three-point shooting numbers have not been tremendous. They are shooting overall about 33% from three, but if you look at them since the beginning of the month of December, north of 38% three-point shooting. They had a really bad outlier of a month in November. They've really kicked it up ever since then. Chris Youngblood, he followed his coach in Amir Abdul-Rahim over from Kennesaw State, Go Owls, and he's been shooting overall for the season 33% from three, but last year shot north of 40% from distance, and it does feel like he's starting to round into that form once again, as he's been able to do a really solid job of being able to supply the team with 15 points per contest, and has seen an uptick in his numbers now, where South Florida is really going to lose this battle of sound low. You've got Keyshawn Pryor, who's really the only guy in the roster that's giving you north of 5 rebounds per game, and they go up against a Memphis team that has Tavi Jones, who's been able to do amazing work with 20 points, 6 boards, multiple assists, shooting in the high 30s from three-point range for Memphis. Overall, though, they are about 174th with regards to rebound rate. I would think that it would be a little bit better. This is a South Florida team that's right around 201st, so even though they're at a disadvantage, it's not as big of a disadvantage as it might appear to be if you just look at the sheer size of these two teams. And Salty Miguel, for the South Florida team, is able to shoot 47% from three-point range. They do go up against a Memphis team that, overall, with their defense, I mean, they're good, but they're not great. They're within the top 80 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, but they're not necessarily a team that's going to lock you down. It is a Memphis team that is about 130th in the country with regards to opponents' three-point shooting percentage. In South Florida, they certainly do allow the arc a little bit as well. They're about 165th in the country with that regard. Javon Quinterly, I think, is going to be the best guard in this game. He's able to supply double figures, 4 assists per contest, has been shooting it well from three-point range, but wanted to see a little bit more out of some of these other ancillary guards. For Memphis, you're only getting about 9.5 points per game out of Jaquan Walton. You've been able to have Caleb Mills only supply 8 points per game, shooting in the mid-30s from three-point ranges, both of those guys, with 13 turnovers per game. So I do take a look at the spot. I do think that South Florida is going to be able to hold in there, and Memphis, I think, should cool off from what we saw a few nights ago when they put up 112 points. And for this Memphis team, it has been really an all-or-nothing sort of circumstance with their offense. Last 3 games, they have scored 62, 170, and 112 points. Meanwhile, it is a South Florida team that they themselves are very much improved with their defense. They have given up 75 points or fewer in now each of their last 7 games, and I do think that they're going to be able to do a good job of holding up here. So I did sell my total 156. Here at the 158.5 to 158, I'm going to be looking at the under and taking the points from South Florida. 767, 768 on the betting board. Florida International, it's a road face-off against Liberty. Liberty is an 11.5 to a 12.5 point favorite. Totals between 139 to 139.5 with Florida International. Did set them as an underdog of 12.5 points. points between 11.5 to 12. I'm going to be willing to lay with Liberty. With Liberty, they are missing their top scorer from last season in Darius McGee, but they've done a good job of mixing and matching all across the board. Kyle Rohde, along with Keenan Menefee, these two guys have been able to combine for about 25.5 points per contest, 5.5 assists for a Liberty team that is in the top 25 nationally in terms of fewest turnovers on a per possession basis. Liberty is always playing that slow grinder style. They're outside the top 300 in terms of total possessions per game. Now, the one trepidation that you do have with Liberty, they shoot 66.5% in the free throw line, but with that said, out of your top 6 scorers, 5 of them do shoot at least 72.2% at the free throw line to be able to help mitigate that a little bit, and out of your top 4 scorers, 3 of them do shoot at least 37% from three-point range, going up against a Florida National team that does not have a single guy on the roster that is giving you north of 5 rebounds per game. Arturio Dean, who actually leads all of college basketball in steals. He's been able to give you 12.5 points, 4.7 boards, 4.5 assists, and 4 steals per contest. He has been absolutely tremendous with that regard. He's right now their top rebounder. And then you've got Javante Hawkins, who's been able to shoot about 44% from three-point range. He is supplying the team with 14 points per game, but this team is going to get completely lambasted on the glass. Not to say that Liberty is necessarily batting down the hatches with regards to their rebounding. They're about 207th in the country in terms of rebound rate, but out of 362 Division I teams, Florida National, 344. So that is very much less than tremendous. It is a Florida National team that is also turning the ball over 15 times per contest. Despite being a team that ranks in the top 20 in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis, they do give the ball away as well. I do think that this is a Liberty team that is going to be very strong in terms of just not falling into the vector of turning the ball over left and right against Florida National. They do a good job with their ball control, and this is a Liberty team that at home is allowing opponents to shoot just 28.5% from three-point range, with Florida National literally having nothing down low whatsoever. Jonathan Ibar, the transfer from North Florida, has been a little bit of Buster Rooney for this team. I do think that Liberty, with their well-rounded style, is able to get the job done in a game where I do think that it's going to be a little bit more up-tempo, and you're going to see a bit more scoring. Florida National in the top 50 in terms of total possessions per game. Florida National 342nd in opponents' three-point shooting percentage. So semi-total 144.5. Looking at the over, and with Liberty, willing to lay up to 12 with them. 769, 770 on the betting board. Delaware is going to be playing against Stony Brook. Stony Brook does find themselves as underdogs of 7 to 7.5 points. 143 to 143.5 is your total, and with Delaware, did set them as a favorite of 8 points. I'm going to be willing to lay the 7 to 7.5 for Delaware. You've got a lot of nice interchangeable pieces for this team, and a team that does a good job of being able to guard the arc. They're allowing opponents to shoot about 32.6% from three-point range. For Delaware, it's been the Jair Davis show on offense. He's been able to give the team 19 plus points, chipping in there right around 5 boards per contest. So I've liked what I've seen there, and you got a Stony Brook team that has been able to do a solid job of being able to take care of the ball. They're turning the ball over less than 12 times per contest. They were dealing with a lot of injuries last year, and a lot of guys have come back into the fold and have been able to make some nice contributions, like Dean Knoll, who came over from Cornell, and Aaron Clark, who came over from Sacred Heart. Both of these guys been able to combine for about 21.5 to 22 points per contest. Both are shooting in the realm of about 32% from three-point range, and they help out Tyler Stevenson more. 39.5% three-point shooter, a guy that's been able to give you about a steal, 15 points per contest. Actually, with the last game, climbed to north of 40% from three-point range, but you don't have a lot of size down low when it comes to this bunch. You've got Charles Mado, who's come over from the Metro Atlantic. He's been able to give you a little bit over 6 rebounds per game, but I do think that Stony Brook is going to be out on the glass. Not that Delaware does an amazing job down low, but they're about 144th with regards to rebound rate, with Christian Ray being able to give you about 8.5 rebounds per game. Meanwhile, this is a Stony Brook team that, with the 7-footer and Fitzmaurice, he only gives you about 4.5 rebounds per game. Stony Brook, 234th in all of college basketball with regards to rebound rate. And then I love what Jalon Trent is able to bring to the table for Delaware. He's a solid scorer with about 10 points per contest. Doesn't shoot it well from 3, but gives you 4 boards, 3.7 assists, steal per contest. Just does a nice job of flowing efficient offense. It's a Delaware team that they only turn the ball over about 10.8 times per contest. Gerald Drumgoole has been able to shoot about 34.5 to 35% from three-point range as well. Got some nice ancillary pieces, doing a solid job being able to pump up that three-point shooting. And this is a Delaware team that they don't necessarily do one thing great. They just do a lot of things relatively solid. And this is a Delaware team that I do think is going to be able to hold up defensively, despite the fact that they've had their issues of their own. They have now given up 76 plus points in 3 of their last 5 games, but they've won up against some pretty solid offenses. Meanwhile, you've got a Delaware team that's been stuck in the mud with their offense, failing to get past the 70-point plateau in 4 of their 5 games since Christmas. So it is an interesting circumstance. I did set my total at 144. I think that we could get close enough for some late game fillings. So here at 143.5 with a pair of relatively mid-tempo teams, looking at the over, especially with Stony Brook, inside the top 225 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. And with the way that the Stony Brook team has been giving up the three ball, Stony Brook out of your 362 Division I teams in terms of opponents' three-point shooting percentage, 330th, allowing opponents to shoot 40% from three on the road. I'm going to be willing to ride with Delaware. So my total 144, looking at the over, I'm willing to lay up to 7.5 with Delaware. 771, 772 on the betting board. Marshall hits the road face-off against Old Dominion. Old Dominion is a underdog at home of 1.5 points. This game is 155.5. This Old Dominion team just can't get right. I set Marshall as a 3.5 point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay it. It's a Marshall team that plays probably a little bit too fast for their own good. Top 40 team in terms of total possessions per game, but Marshall actually does a halfway decent job on the road. They are allowing opponents to shoot just 32.8% from three-point range in a road/shoot court environment. You've got Obiano Onchale Killian giving you about 16 points, north of 7 rebounds, north of a block per contest, shoots in the mid-30s from three-point range. That's something that I don't think Old Dominion is going to be able to match up with. And for this Marshall team, they're about 171st in the country in terms of points allowed on a per-possession basis, but in a road/shoot corner environment, a top 125 team with that regard. And Old Dominion is typically a very proud and good defense. Man, that is not the case this year. 306th in the country in terms of points allowed on a per-possession basis. And for Old Dominion, you do have two relatively solid scorers. Chauncey Jenkins, Vincent Alouette. They've been able to combine for about 32 points per contest. They've done a relatively solid job there, but this team is going to get destroyed on the boards. You've got Nate Martin for this Marshall team, who's been able to give you 9+ rebounds per game. Not to say this Marshall team is necessarily like the Monstars with regards to rebounding. They're about 153rd with regards to their rebound rate, but Old Dominion 318th. So that has been a big, giant issue. And for this Old Dominion team, one thing that they do on offense is they do a relatively solid job of taking care of the ball. They don't necessarily beat themselves overly much, but it's not like they've got any sort of amazing three-point shooting. It is a Marshall team that has been lacking from three-point range. You can use a little bit more of a Camden Kerfman, who's been able to give you 13.5 points per contest, starting to pick it up with his three-point shooting at about 34% from the outside, but you've been able to get quite a bit more recently since the return of Cameron Crawford as well. Cameron Crawford, he was out of the fold for much of the back half of December into early January, comes back in his first game back against South Alabama, puts in there 23 points. Last season was a 42% three-point shooter, so I do think that he's going to be able to give this team a little bit of pop. And then this is a Old Dominion bunch. You just take a look at the way that they're getting gashed time and time again. 77+ points allowed in 4 out of their last 5 games, and if you want to date it back a little bit further, this is a bunch that has allowed at least 77 points in all but 2 of their games since the beginning of the month of December. No bueno, to say the least. This is a spot where I did set my total at 153.5. I think that this Old Dominion team is going to get gashed defensively, but I just don't have the faith in them offensively, as they're still outside the top 200 in terms of total possessions per game to be able to get the job done against a Marshall team that has been a little bit better with their defense. They have now given up 75 points or fewer in now 5 out of their last 6 games. So I'm going to be looking at the under, and with Marshall, Southern is a 3.5 point favorite, so I'm going to be willing to lay the small number with them. 773, 774 on the betting board. Northeastern is hitting the road face off against North Carolina A&T. A&T is a home underdog of 7 to 7.5 points. Totals between 147.5 and 149.5. Did set my total 145.5. I'm going to be looking at the under for North Carolina A&T. This has been a less than efficient defense this year. No shock there in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. North Carolina A&T in the bottom 25 in all of college basketball, 355th to be exact. Now, they've been a little bit better at home. We'll give a little bit of credit where credit is due. They're allowing about 16.6 points fewer per 100 possessions at home rather than in a roadside shoot corner environment. And for Northeastern, even though they play slowly, they're outside the top 275 in terms of total possessions per game. Doesn't mean that you play good defense. They're 91st in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, and they're giving about 16.5 points more per 100 possessions in a roadside shoot corner environment rather than at home. But I just can't get there on this North Carolina A&T team because you've got Landon Glasper, who's been a tremendous scorer for this team. He's been able to give you 20 points per contest, chipping in there a little bit over 2 assists per game, and then you do have one very nice facilitator for this team. You've been able to get about 5 assists, 11.5 points per game out of Cayman Shell. Past that, there's just nobody to help out this team. They have not got anything to really note down low other than Jason Murphy, who's now been able to give you in that neighborhood about 7.5 rebounds per game, but he played just 16 minutes in that game against Hampton. It looked like he suffered a little bit of an injury, so that could really be pushing this team backwards as well. It's a North Carolina A&T team that, to their credit, in terms of fewest turnovers on a per possession basis, they are a top 30 team in the country, but they shoot 30% from three-point range, 40.5% from the floor. You just have nobody else being out Glasper right now. And then for this Northeastern team, yeah, it's a hot mess with them, but you do have someone down low that you're able to hang your hat on it. Been able to get 12.5 points, 6.5 boards out of the Notre Dame transfer and Chris Doherty. It is a Northeastern team that they only shoot about 31.5% from the outside, and they need to clean up the 13.5 turnovers per game, but this is an A&T team that they really don't force any of those turnovers. A&T 348th in the country in terms of opponents' three-point shooting percentage. I will say, only allowing opponents to shoot about 32.8% from three-point range when they're at home. Meanwhile, this is a Northeastern team that they've actually done a better job of guarding the arc on the road rather than at home, but it's been bad on both fronts, 326th in the country with this regard. But you have a pair of teams that they don't necessarily play super duper fast. North Carolina A&T is better with their defense when they're at home, but their offense has not really been able to elevate when they've been at home as well. They did put up north of 80 points in their last game against Hampton. That's just a case of Hampton being a pretty poopy program, to say the least. And for this North Carolina A&T team, they have failed to get past the 70-point plateau in 3 of their last 5 games. Meanwhile, you've got a Northeastern team that it appears as though the defense is coming back for them. 68 points or fewer allowed in 3 out of their last 4 games. Meanwhile, the offense is coupled with 71 points or fewer in each of their last 5. So it did set my total 145.5, looking at the under, but I do think that Northeastern going to do a good job with Doherty and company being able to win the battle down low, so I'm going to be willing to lay up to 9 points with Northeastern, and I'm going to be taking a look at the under. 775, 776 on the betting board. Drexel is going to be playing up some Monmouth. Monmouth does find themselves as underdogs of 8.5 to 9 points. Totals between 135.5 to 136. Did set my total 135. Looking at the under, got a Drexel team that has been able to really pump up their offense recently. This is a Drexel team that overall for the season, they are more of a defense-oriented team, and they are outside the top 250 in terms of total possessions per game. But all of a sudden, we've seen some sort of an explosion from Drexel. I don't know what form of sorcery has gotten into them, but this Drexel team has gotten past 77 points in 5 out of their last 6 games. After, prior to that, they had scored 70 points or fewer, and I think all but one of their first, 9 games of the season. I have no idea what's happened, but that said, you've got a Monmouth team that they themselves have been all over the stinking place with regards to their offense. Take this for their last 5 games. 56, 51, 81, 56, and 83 points. That's their scoring output. So, it has been around the world for Monmouth. You've got Xander Rice. He comes into play for his father in King Rice. He was playing at Bucknell prior to this, 20.5 points, 3 assists, shoots 38.5% from three-point range. For a Monmouth team that's legitimately shooting 37.5% from the outside. They've been pretty rock solid with that regard, and the reason why Drexel has been able to pump up their offense has been the 3-ball. Prior to this run, they were one of the most deplorable teams from three-point range in all of college basketball. And it's not like they're lighting the world on fire. They're shooting about 32.8% from three-point range, but you just take a look at their last 3 games. They're shooting north of 41% from three-point range, and they do have to go up against a Monmouth team that they themselves are really able to knock them down. Monmouth, a team that as a whole, they're in the top 35 in terms of three-point shooting percentage. It's traveled relatively well as well. They're in the top 50 in terms of three-point shooting percentage in a road/shoot court environment, and the big difference maker for Drexel has been Justin Moore, giving you more right around about 13 points, shooting only about 30.5% from three-point range, but it's been much better here down the stretch. And then you've got a pair of guys in Mate Okoros along with Luke House, combined to shoot about 41.5% from three-point range, and then Armani Williams has been able to do a tremendous job down low for Drexel, which is why this has still been a relatively solid defense. We have seen the Drexel defense slip just a little bit since their offensive explosion. That typically does happen when a team is able to just hit mock turbo with regards to their offense, but it is still a Drexel team that does rank in the top 55 nationally in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, and it has been a completely different team at home rather than on the road. They are giving up 18.7 points fewer per 100 possessions at home rather than on the road, with having Mr. Williams give you about 8 boards, a little bit over a block and a half per contest, and Monmouth is going to have a tough time matching up with that. But you've got Jack Collins along with Nikita Kosanatovsky, hopefully I said that correctly, giving you a combined about 14.5 rebounds per game, but Monmouth certainly going to be getting blown away with that regard. It is a Monmouth team that's about 250th in the country with regards to rebound rate. Meanwhile, Drexel 10th in the country with regards to rebound rate. That said, I do think that Drexel going to fall back to earth a little bit more with regards to their offense. I did set my number at 8, so here at the 9, I'm going to be taking a look at the points, and I do think that this is going to be a little bit of a lower scoring game. This has been a Monmouth team that has had a few struggles on defense, but this is a squad with regards to being able to guard the three-point arc that is in the top 125 nationally. So I did set my line at 135 with the total, looking at the under, and anything north of 8 taking the points with Monmouth. 777, 778 on the betting board. Seattle, it's a road face off against Stephen F. Austin. Stone Cold Stephen F. Austin finds themselves as 5 to 5.5 point favorites. Totals between 138.5 and 139, and with Stephen F. Austin did set them as a favorite of 5. So here at the 5.5, going to be taking a look at the points with Seattle. Seattle's been able to do a tremendous job with their defense all season long, and they do have a go-to scorer in Cam Towson. Towson has been tremendous with about 18.5 points per contest, shoots in the mid-30s from three-point range, and now he's got a lot of help around him. You've got guys like Brandon Chartfield, Kobe Williamson, who have been able to give you 12-plus rebounds per game for a Seattle bunch that, with their defense, the main strength of it is being able to guard the three-point arc. 5th in all of college basketball with regards to opponents' three-point shooting percentage. It is also a Seattle team that's done a nice job cleaning up the glass. They're at 64th in the country with regards to overall rebound rate, right on par with Stephen F. Austin. Stephen F. Austin is 66th with this regard, and it's just a Stephen F. Austin team that swarms. Their three-point shooting percentage has fallen drastically from season ago. They were actually a top 50 team last season in terms of three-point shooting percentage, actually closer to a top 25 team. This year, that has fallen off with Day Hall really being the lone guy that gives you north of 9 points per contest, 11 points, 5 boards for a team that only shoots 33.5% from three, and this figures to be a sloppy Joe's game because you've got a Stephen F. Austin team that ranks in the top 10 nationally in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis, but then if you look at the percentage of offensive plays that ended a turnover for Stephen F. Austin as well, they're in the bottom 20 with that regard as well, so that is not necessarily too terrific, though Seattle, one of their main kryptonites is the fact that they're 304th in the country in terms of turnovers per offensive play as well, so I do think that this is going to be a game that's going to be yucky. It's going to be involving a lot of dead possessions, even though you got a Stephen F. Austin team that plays relatively up-tempo, and it's not like Seattle's a slug themselves. I do think that that's going to be playing a big role, but with regards to Stephen F. Austin, a lot of the turnovers that they force are live ball turnovers, which does lead to a lot of fast break layups, and I do think that Seattle is going to find a way to be able to slice and dice and be able to find a few open looks on a Stephen F. Austin team that has not done a great job of being able to guard the arc. They are 256th in all of college basketball with regards to three-point shooting percentage. Jason Christotoniflis, hopefully I said that correctly, the gentleman from Creighton has been able to give you double figures, and you've got AJ Kajuse when it comes to this Stephen F. Austin team, relatively good facilitator that's able to give you about 3 assists, 8.5 points per contest, doesn't shoot it well from three-point range, but you still do have a pair of guys in Nana Ati Boasico along with Matt Heyman, who have been able to shoot north of 42% from three-point range, so I do think that you get just enough offense here for the over. It is a Seattle team that has now given up 80-plus points in each of their last 2 games after they had given up 72 or fewer in games that wrapped up in regulation, and all but 2 of them in their first 15 games of the season. Meanwhile, it is a Stephen F. Austin team that, boy, are they cooking right now. 80-plus points scored in each of their last 5 games, and they have surrendered at least 73 points in each of their last 4. So it did something by total 141. I'm going to be looking at the over, but with Seattle looking to take anything north of 5 with them. 779, 780 on the betting board. Troy hits the road face-off against South Alabama. South Alabama is an underdog of 1.5. Total on this game between 149 and 150.5, and with Troy, I did set them as a 3.5 point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay the number. Troy has actually been covering north of 70% of their spreads this far this season. It's been really impressive to watch them work, and for Troy, has been a squad that has really been able to bat down the hatches defensively, giving up 65 points or fewer in 3 out of their last 5 games. They do a nice job of just cutting you off from the three-point arc, and they've done a nice job with their backcourt as a whole, as Christian Eugene, coupled with Tayton Conaway, they've been able to combine for about 27 points per contest, and both are shooting north of 42.5% from three-point range. Now, what Troy needs to avoid is the turnovers. They have turned the ball over north of 14 times per contest. This is a South Alabama team that really doesn't force the issue, and for South Alabama, they are now well outside the top 250 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, a far cry from what they used to be. And for South Alabama, the one thing that they do an okay job of is being able to guard the arc, except at home. They are allowing opponents to shoot 35.9% from three-point range at home, 29.5% from three-point range in a road/shoot court environment. Meanwhile, this is a Troy team that they'll get gashed from the outside, 221st in the country with that regard. But with South Alabama, the rebounding just has not been there for them all season long in terms of overall rebound rate. The team is clocking in 291st in all of college basketball. That's a place where you're able to hurt this Troy team, as you've only got one guy giving you north of 5.2 rebounds per game in Thomas Dowd. Meanwhile, when it comes to the South Alabama team, you've been able to have Isaiah Gator, who comes in from the non-Division I level, being able to be a little bit of a do-it-all player, 2.5 assists, 4.5 boards, 17 points per contest on 37.5% three-point shooting. And to the credit of South Alabama, they only turn the ball over about 11 times per contest, but they shoot just 31% from three-point range. Thomas Howell is the only guy on the roster that gives you north of 4.3 rebounds per game, 7 points, 6.9 rebounds per game. It's just been a team that's been dealing with all sorts of inconsistency. Judah Brown, their top returning scorer from a season ago, has been all sorts of banged up, and it's a South Alabama team that want to talk about a defense that's currently getting gashed. 85-plus points surrendered in their first 4 games of the new year. So it is a very interesting circumstance here with the Troy team that they have had their metrics thrown a little bit out of whack because they they played a bunch of double overtime games. It made them look like they were a little bit more of an up-tempo team than what they were. And this has been a Troy team that's legitimately done a very good job of holding up on the interior. It's a team that in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis is a top 100 team in all of college basketball. And I do think that for South Alabama, they're going to continue to regress a little bit with their offense. And I do think that South Alabama is going to find a little bit more offense, as this has been a South Alabama team that's played a little bit too fast for their own good. Typically, they're outside the top 225 in terms of total possessions per game. They're in the top 100 this season. So did set my total 149.5, looking at the under. But I do think that Troy perseveres here, willing to lay up to 3 with the men of Troy to go along with the under. 781, 782 on the betting board. Oral Roberts at the road to face off against North Dakota. North Dakota is a underdog of 2 points at home. Total on this game is 151. North Dakota is a bunch that has been very much inconsistent with their outside shooting, and I think that that's going to hurt them against Oral Roberts. I did set Oral Roberts as a 4.5 point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay the number with Oral Roberts. They have really slowed down their tempo outside the top 230 in terms of total possessions per game, but these guys still stroke it from three-point range. Oral Roberts shooting 37.5% from three-point range, and a top 20 team in terms of fewest turnovers on a per-possession basis. They are only turning the ball over about 9.3 times per game for Oral Roberts. When it comes to points scored on a per-possession basis, this bunch is clocking in right around about 168th, which is much more than what we can say for our good friends over there at North Dakota. North Dakota, 236th in the country, and for North Dakota, you just need to find a little bit more on the glass, as this team has got Amir Kulojovic, who's been able to give you about 6.5 rebounds per game for Oral Roberts. They have been dealing with the injury to Tashung Weaver. He's been one of their top rebounders, but you've got Jalen Bedford, who's really been able to pick up the slack for this team. It is an Oral Roberts team that, even with them being able to supply about 6.5 boards per contest, they're on their 15 points, shooting about 42.5% from three-point range. So it's been a little bit in and out of the fold, has been able to return, has been able to look very solid for this team. Even with that, though, they're about 347th in the country with regards to rebound rate. North Dakota, they're more in that neighborhood, about 240th, so they've got a little bit of an advantage there. And for North Dakota, they really don't beat themselves. 11.2 turnovers per game, but they shoot 30.7% from three-point range, and that is a very good way to be able to knock off this Oral Roberts team. As Oral Roberts, they are 259th in all of college basketball with regards to opponents' three-point shooting percentage. Meanwhile, North Dakota at home, they're allowing opponents to shoot 42.2% from three-point range. When you've got Isaac McBride giving you 18 plus points per contest, shooting north of 35% from three-point range, that makes it a tough state of affairs for a North Dakota team that has had BJ Omot being able to supply 16.5 points, 4.5 boards, and now they've got Tyree Iheanacho back in the fold. He began his career at North Dakota, went to James Madison, was a two-time transfer that was out for like the first 10 or so games of the season, has been able to give this team a nice spark. He's been able to give them 5 plus boards for the last 5 games to be able to fortify things down low, but it's a little bit of an inconsistent score, and this is an Oral Roberts team that they started out the year very rough. They underwent a coaching change, but Mr. Russell Springman has got this offense springing once again. They have been able to get to at least 76 points in all 5 of their games ever since Christmas, and for that matter, this is an Oral Roberts team that has been able to do a relatively solid job with regards to their defensive numbers as well. I'm not going to say that they're amazing by any stretch of the imagination, but now they have been giving up fewer than 66 points in their last 7 games. Meanwhile, it is a North Dakota team that they themselves, they have given up at least 79 points in 3 out of their last 5 games, 74 plus in 4 of those games. And I do think that Oral Roberts going to get them from the outside. Did set Oral Roberts as a 4.5 point favorite. Could be willing to lay the number. Did set my total at a 149.5. I just don't think that North Dakota is going to be able to do their part with this total. So looking at the under and going to be willing to lay it with Oral Roberts. 783, 784 on the betting board. St. Thomas sits the road face off against South Dakota. South Dakota is a 6.5 point home underdog, and your total on this game, you're going to be getting it anywhere between 141.5 and 142. And with South Dakota, do feel like they should be an underdog at home, but I think we've went just a touch too far. I set my line at 5.5, so I'm going to be willing to take the points. This is a South Dakota team that's able to light it up from three-point range here, shooting well north of 35.5% from distance, going up against the St. Thomas team that it's hard for them to be able to win by margin because St. Thomas is a bottom 30 team in all of college basketball in terms of total possessions per game. Now, for St. Thomas, a much improved defense. Their first 2 years at the Division I level, they were well outside the top 250 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. They are now a top 100 team in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, and if you look at what they've been able to do in a road/neutral court environment, this has been a top 75 defense when they have been away from home. Now, you're going up against a South Dakota team that is not a top 100 defense in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. They are 320th, so that's going to be a big giant problem going up against the St. Thomas team that does a solid job of being able to throw it in there from three-point range. They shoot about 36.1% from three-point range. Parker Jorklin has been your main scorer, 13.5 points, 4.5 boards, and then Raheem Anthony, 10.5 points, right around 4.5 boards. He's a 45% three-point shooter. Where you can hurt this St. Thomas team is that they don't have a lot of team size. This team does not have a single guy that gives you north of 5 rebounds per game. They are 238th in the country with regards to overall rebound rate, and this is a South Dakota team that they are inside the top 115 with regards to their overall rebound rate. Lahat Thione has been a big reason why. He's come in from Utah along Central Florida, 13.5 points, 10 boards, and he helps out so many of these other guys just be able to get good, clean looks as well, as he does a relatively solid job flowing the offense, being that main post presence while everyone else is looking to bomb it from the outside. You've got a 43.5% three-point shooter in Felix Borstrom, who's been able to come on a little bit strong here towards the back half of the season. His minutes have been a little bit touch and go, but whenever he's been out there, he's been able to hit a few threes, but he's more of an ancillary piece, and when he's not going, and when he's just not out there on the floor in general, he's been a healthy scratch in a few games as far as the season. Caleb Stewart has been your main man to be able to get things going. 14 points, 42.5% three-point shooter. Did have a little bit of a clunker against Montana about a week or so ago, but was able to return, was able to go out there against Oral Roberts, had 21 points. I think he suffered like a very minor injury in that game against Montana, but should be good to go in this one. And they do good to go up against a St. Thomas team that overall they've been relatively solid with regards to their three-point shooting defense, but it does slip up a little bit more on the road, allowing opponents to shoot 34% from the outside. And for South Dakota, there's just a much better perimeter defense at home rather than on the road. Opponents shoot about 38% from three-point range against them in a road/shoot court environment compared to 33% at home. And with Boston Holt being able to give you north of 9 points per contest, being able to dole out the ball a little bit, I do think that South Dakota, because they are going to be able to do a good job on the glass, is going to hold in there against a St. Thomas team that is very wily. They do a nice job not beating themselves, fewer than 10 turnovers per contest, but it's also the St. Thomas team that they're not going to force a lot of ball pressure as well, which bodes well for South Dakota. So I did set my line at 5.5 here on north of 6, going to be one take the points with South Dakota, and did set my total at 141.5. I do think that this is going to be a slow down game, and I think that St. Thomas going to have a little bit of a tough time knocking in some of those open looks, and this is a South Dakota team that they themselves have been held to 66 points or fewer in now 3 out of their last 4 games. So going to be taking a look at the under and the points with South Dakota. 785, 786 on the betting board. UT Arlington plays also UT Rio Grande Valley. Grand Valley is a 10.5 point underdog. Totals for 157 to 157.5. It's up my total 155.5. I'm looking at the under. It is a Grand Valley team that has been a mess on defense there, outside the top 300 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. And that's been a team that's been able to give you a little bit of rebounding, as you do get about 6.5 rebounds per game out of Dalen Williams, and then Aaron Freeman. He's got some versatility for this team to be able to chuck in there 12 points, 6 boards, tries to pop threes, doesn't necessarily pop them very well, but he is capable of shooting threes, so there is that. But I mean, it's really going to come down to what you're going to be able to get out of Elijah Elliott along with Hakeem Abdul-Hakim. These two guys, they've been able to give you about 29 points per contest. Abdul-Hakim has been able to shoot about 39% from three-point range, but for Grand Valley, the 15.5 turnovers per game, that is a little bit of an issue. But for UT Arlington, this team is also in the bottom 20 in terms of possessions that end in a turnover on offense for them. They've had a very tough time being able to take care of the ball. You have been able to get some relatively solid production out of Philip Russell. He was the top scorer over at Southeast Missouri State 8 seasons ago, was one of those 2-time transfers that was on the fold for like the first 8 or 10 games of the season. Ever since he's come back, the scoring has been up for the team, but they still are turning the ball for quite a bit. And for UT Arlington, they just get destroyed in terms of guarding the three-point arc. 351st in all of college basketball in terms of opponents' three-point shooting percentage, allowing opponents to shoot 38.3% from the outside. Now, the good news for them is that they are going up against the UT Rio Grande Valley team that has not really been able to get it going from three-point range, but Grand Valley, the one thing that they've been able to do on defense, they are a top 125 team in terms of opponents' three-point shooting percentage, so they've been able to do a relatively solid job there for this UT Arlington team. They should be able to win the battle on the boards as well. You've been able to have DeJuan Gordon be able to give you north of 7.5 rebounds per game. from Mark Wilson, he's able to give you 12.5 points, right in the neighborhood about 7.5, 8 rebounds per game. So these guys, they should be able to do a good job there, as it's a Rio Grande Valley team that's 327th with regards to rebound rate. UT Arlington 123rd, and for UT Arlington, that actually ascends to a 57.5% rebound rate at home. That is by far a top 100 mark in all of college basketball. Mekhi Williams has been able to give you a little bit over 3 assists per contest as well, but Grand Valley has looked very good with their offense recently, 76 plus points in now each out of their last 5 games. Defense still very much a work in progress, but the defensive numbers have been very much warped. 2 out of their last 3 games did go to overtime, so it makes it look a little bit worse than what it is. And this is a UT Arlington team that they themselves, with Russell in the fold, have been a little bit better on offense, scoring 73 plus points in each of their last 4 contests. But that said, I do think that with these offensive numbers just being a little bit hiked up by the fact that Grand Valley did go to overtime in 2 of their last 3 games, it is going to cause for just a little bit of a lower scoring affair here. But I do think that Arlington is going to be able to get by. I think that they win from within, and this is a Grand Valley team that they themselves are quite sloppy with the ball, and I do think the turnovers going to cost you an over. Did semi-total 155.5. Looking under with Arlington, 1 to lay up to 12 with them. 787, 788 on the betting board. Tarleton State plays us at Abilene Christian. Abilene Christian is an underdog of 4.5 points. Seeing a 5 out there as well. Total on this game, it is 140 to 141, and with Abilene Christian, I did set them as an underdog of 4 points. So here at the 4.5 to 5, I'm going to be willing to take the points. Two very similar teams here. Both of these teams rank in the top 3 nationally in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis. Both of these teams are a whole is greater than the sum of its parts team, with one top scorer, Ja'Cory Smith, for this Tarleton State team to be able to give you 15 plus points per contest, and Ali Abdu-Diba. How about him being able to supply Abilene Christian with about 15.5 points, 4.5 boards on about a steal per contest for him, and for Abilene Christian, out of their top 6 scorers, you got 5 of them giving you at least a steal per contest. Very similar for Tarleton State. As for Tarleton State, you've got 4 of your top 5 scorers giving you at least 1.2 steals per game, and you've been able to get a little bit of outside shooting, 37% three-point shooting out of Devon Barnes for Tarleton State, supplying the team with about 11 points per game. With Smith as well, he's been able to give you a little bit over 4 boards per contest, so these guys have been able to step up in a nice way, and they've been dealing with a few injuries. Dario Domingos for the Tarleton State team has been in and out of the fold, but when he's been out there, he has been able to give the team right around about 4.5 points. He's able to shoot it relatively okay from 3-point range, but he just has not been consistent enough to be a factor for this team. And it is a Tarleton State team that as a whole, they're only shooting about 29.5% from 3-point range. It's an Abilene Christian team that they do have quite a bit more 3-point shooting pop at, right around about 32.7% from distance, but it's also a Tarleton State team that turns the ball over more than a time fewer per game than Abilene Christian. Abilene Christian does get a little bit loose with the ball, and for Tarleton State, this is a team that has been able to do a relatively okay job of being able to guard the 3-point arc in comparison to a lot of these teams that they do try to pressure the ball and they do try to force a bunch of turnovers. They're about 223rd in the country in terms of opponents' 3-point shooting percentage. To the credit of Abilene Christian, they're about 176 with this regard. That's far better than Stephen F. Austin, who's in the same conference and just getting cooked from 3-point range. But I do take a look at this Abilene Christian team, and I do think that they should be able to hold in there. I do think that they are going to be able to do an okay job on the glass. As for Abilene Christian, that is always a main issue they have with them because they do focus so much on being able to generate turnovers. They're rough on the glass, but I mean, the same goes for Tarleton State. Tarleton State, 278th in the country with regards to overall rebound rate. Abilene Christian, 349th. And for Abilene Christian, having some of these top flight scorers like an Arion Simmons, like a Hunter Jack Madden, combining for about 25 points per contest, and Madden shooting 42% from 3. I think they hold in there in a game that should involve quite a few turnovers, but I think is going to involve a lot of open looks as well. I did semi-total at a 144. Here at the 140, I'm looking at the over. Abilene Christian, quite an up-tempo team. Tarleton State, they're looking to play low and slow, so I do think that you get something just right in the middle on this one. So going to be taking a look at this little over, and anything north of 4, taking the points with Abilene Christian. 789, 790 on the betting board. South Dakota State is going to be playing us Omaha. Omaha does find themselves as an underdog of 9.5 to 10 points. 149 to 149.5 is the total, and for South Dakota State, did set them as a favorite of 10.5 points. The 10 is the max I'm going to be willing to lay, but I'm going to be willing to lay the 10. This is a South Dakota State team that has really slowed it down with regards to their total possessions per game. Like, this team is 347th in all of college basketball in terms of total possessions per game. So I do find that to be very intriguing. Going up against a Nebraska-Omaha team that they themselves are no Blazers. They're 301st in the country with this regard, but you've also got a pair of teams that just because you play slow doesn't mean that you play great defense. And for South Dakota State, 350th. There's a points allowed on a per possession basis, and Nebraska-Omaha is a little bit better, but they're 254th. But the reason why I'm going to be one to lay with South Dakota State is that, for one, Nebraska-Omaha just has no idea what they're doing on the glass. They're about 245th in all of college basketball with regards to rebound rate. You've been able to have Markel Sutton be able to give you about 6 or so rebounds per game, but that's about it for this team. And for two, this is a Nebraska-Omaha team that I don't think that they're going to be able to match up with the overall versatility that you got with South Dakota State's 3-point shooting. It's a South Dakota State team that they themselves certainly do give up the arc, 285th in all of college basketball with regards to opponents' 3-point shooting percentage, but opponents are shooting just 30.3% from 3-point range against them at home. That goes to about 38% in a road/shoot-quarter environment. And then you've got a Nebraska-Omaha team that, to their credit, they are about 119th of the country in terms of opponents' 3-point shooting percentage in a road/shoot-quarter environment. Opponents are only shooting a little bit north of 30% from 3-point range against them, but I do think that the overall versatility of South Dakota State along the perimeter is just going to be too much. You've got Frankie Fiddler for this Omaha team being able to supply the team with about 18.5 points, 5.5 boards, shoots 39% from 3-point range for a team that they don't turn the ball over a lot. 10.5 turnovers per game for South Dakota State. They've done a solid solid job of being able to take care of the ball as well. About 12.3 turnovers per game. Would like to see that be a little bit lower, but they've been improving as the season goes along. And for the South Dakota State team, among guys that have scored north of 5.1 points per contest, every single one of them that has made at least 1 3, shooting at least 36.5% from distance, including Zeke Mayo. 3.5 assists, 1.3 steals, 6.5 boards, 18.5 points per game. Luke Capel, Charlie Easley, they combine to shoot about 39.5% from distance with 21.5 points per game between the two of them. It just feels like the South Dakota State team is getting better and better offensively as the season goes along. This is a bunch that they have now been able to get to at least 80 points in 4 of their last 5 games. They have broken the 72-point plateau in every single one of those contests. And for this Omaha team, there has been a defense that has been a little bit better recently. They have given up 63 points or fewer in 4 of their last 5 games, but coming off of giving up 92 against North Dakota State, it has been an offense that has been all over the place this season as well. And I do think that South Dakota State is going to be able to get in rhythm in this one. I do think that they take it to an Omaha team that is better with regards to their 3-point shooting percentage. I want to see it to believe it against better competition. I do think that South Dakota State lights them up from the outside. So I did set my total at a 150.5. I'm looking at the over, and I'm going to be willing to lay up to 10 with South Dakota State. 791, 782 on the betting board. Portland State hits the road face-off against Northern Arizona. The Lumberjacks of Northern Arizona are a 4.5-point underdog. Total on this game is 141.5 with Northern Arizona. I did set them as underdogs for 5 points. So here at the 4.5, I'm not going to be willing to lay really anything more than that with Portland State, but I'm going to be willing to lay it. It is a Northern Arizona bunch that has had quite a bit of issue on defense. Serves points a lot on a per possession basis. 218th in all of college basketball, and they were really relying upon Carson Tout being in the fold. He was their top rebounder from a season ago. Someone right around 6'8" was able to dole out north of 3 assists per contest, and, well, he has not played this far this season, so that has been an almighty issue for them. Now, they are going up against a squad that certainly is not having those guys that we saw from last season just absolutely elevate the team. Like last year, you had someone in Cam Parker who was a really good facilitator, giving you like 15-plus points. He was able to throw in their 5 assists, did a really good job of being able to flow the offense. You don't have anyone like that this year, but instead, they have taken the whole is greater than the sum of its parts approach. As for this Portland State team, you've got so many guys that are just logging at least 9 points per contest. As a matter of fact, 5 different guys between 9.1 and 10.7 points per contest. KJ Allen, Jarrell Satterfield have led the way with about 21 points, shooting in the neighborhood about 34% from 3-point range. You've got a team that, as a committee, they've been able to do a solid job of being able to hit the glass as well. Each of your top 3 scorers have been able to give you at least 4.5 rebounds per game, and they go up against a Northern Arizona team that, on top of them not playing any defense, they have not been able to do a great job on the glass. 345th in all of college basketball with regards to rebound rate. It's a Portland State team as a work in progress there at 249th of the country, but they've actually got a better rebound rate when they're away from home rather than when they are at home. And this is also a Northern Arizona team that has been able to get a little bit of something out of Trent McLaughlin, about 14.5 points per contest, shoots 35% from 3, but all in all, for Northern Arizona, 13.5 turnovers per game as a relatively low-tempo team, shooting 65% at the free throw line. McLaughlin is the only guy that gives you north of 10.5 points per contest. Carson Basham is the only guy that's been able to chip in there north of 4.3 rebounds per game. It is all right now going wrong for a Northern Arizona team that has given up at least 73 points in each of their last 5 games, 79-plus points in all but one of them. And if you want to date it back even further for this Northern Arizona team, they have now allowed at least 70 points in each of their last 9 games, with the lone exception being their triumph over Pacific. Meanwhile, for Portland State, they themselves 72 points or fewer surrendered in 3 of their last 4 games. So I do think that we see Portland State go on the road, get the job done. Willing to lay up to 4.5 there, and did set my total at a 145. I do think that Portland State is going to get to a Northern Arizona team that has more holes in it than Swiss cheese. So looking at the under, and I'm going to be willing to lay with Portland State, 783, 784 on the betting board. North Dakota State plays us at Denver. The Pioneers are a 2-point underdog on the road. Totals between 159.5 and 160 with Denver. I did set them as an underdog of 2 points. So here at the 2, it's a little bit of wait and see mode, though I'm seeing a 1.5 out there. At a 1.5, I would be willing to lay it with North Dakota State. The Bison, they certainly have been a bunch that has been giving up all sorts of points. They're outside the top 275 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. And for North Dakota State, they're a relatively slow tempo team. They are outside the top 250 in terms of total possessions per game. They go up against a Denver team that they are all gas, no brakes. This Denver team, 22nd in all of college basketball in terms of points scored on a per possession basis. They've got Tommy Bruner, who, depending upon the day, he's either going to be number 1 or number 2 in all of college basketball with regards to scoring. 25.4 points per contest, 4.3 assists, shooting 41% from 3-point range. He has been absolutely remarkable this season. Then you've got some help around him, as you've got a Pac-12 transfer in Takeo Tanamo, who's been able to give you 17.5 points, 9 boards. He shoots in the low to mid-30s from three-point range. You've been able to get a little bit out of Jackson Brenchley, who began his career over at Utah, 5.5 boards, 10 points. He shoots 34.5% from three. And Denver as a whole, they play relatively fast. They only turn the ball over 9.5 times per contest. In terms of turnovers per possession, top 25 team in all of college basketball, shooting 37.5% from three-point range. Going up against a North Dakota State team that they do not generate any steals whatsoever. They are the Ned Flanders of college basketball in that regard, but they also bomb it from three-point range at about 38.5%. Denver is also a team that's not shy to go a little bit more up-tempo as well. In terms of total possessions per game, Denver currently clocking in right around about 56th in all of college basketball. Certainly think that you're going to be getting quite a bit of tempo in this game. You've got a lot of ancillary pieces for Denver that have been able to step up, been able to give you quite a bit of scoring as well. But I do think that with Tommy Bruner leading the way, with this North Dakota State team just really not having rhyme or reason with regards to rebounding, and that's where you can really hurt this Denver team. But you've got someone like an Andrew Morgan that's only giving you about 4.5 rebounds per game. You've had Bowden Skunberg do a solid job, being able to give you about 17, 18 points per contest. But with this Denver team being able to win the battle down low, this is a North Dakota State squad that, in terms of rebound rate, 276th in all of college basketball. Denver, they're clocking in more around 97th. I do think that Denver is going to be able to go out there, dominate this game, in which we're going to be seeing a lot of clean possessions. We're going to be seeing a lot of made shots. Did set my total 164 looking at the over. And with North Dakota State, I did set them as a 2-point favorite here at a 1.5. That'd be my max buy point in terms of being able to lay with them, just because I do think that with North Dakota State, though, you do have a Denver team that they're going to score a ton. Man, this team has been a sieve on defense. If you take a look at them in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, they are well outside the top 275, and it goes way down when they're in a road/neutral court environment. For Denver, they are 315th in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, and North Dakota State does get a nice boost from being at home. North Dakota State, in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, way down. They're at 304th, but give it up about 5.5 points fewer per 100 possessions when they are at home. So it is a spot where I see plenty of points in this game. Set my total 164, and I think that North Dakota State ekes it out at home, willing to lay up to 1.5 with them. 785, 796 on the betting board. It is Sacramento State. They're going to be playing us in Northern Colorado. Northern Colorado does find themselves as 7.5 to 8.5 point favorites. Your total on this game is 148.5. Northern Colorado, I did set as a 9-point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay this summer with the Bears of Northern Colorado. They do have St. Thomas. No, not the St. Thomas Tommies, but St. Thomas, the basketball player who comes in from Loyola Chicago, who's been able to do a tremendous job of just being a versatile do-it-all player for them. Now, you've got DeJour Reeves, who's been able to help out a little bit as well, giving you about 15 to 16 points per contest, but Thomas is a do-it-all guy. 9.5 points, 3 assists, 20 points per contest. He's sort of a poor man's Dylan Jones over there at Weber State, shoots about 34.5% from three-point range, ceiling half per contest, very much cut from the same cloth there. And Sacramento State is trying this with Duncan Boom Boom Bell as well. 13.5 points, 8.5 boards, 2.5 assists per contest. The problem for Sacramento State is they're in the bottom 40 in terms of turnovers on a per possession basis. Turning the ball over 16 times per contest. You've got Z.R. Moda, who's come over from Utah State. He's able to shoot about 35.5% from three-point range, but Akalma Wayne, who is so good for the team down low a season ago, has had his minute slash, hasn't been the same guy, only gave you about 3.5 or so rebounds per game. And the Sacramento State team under David Patrick, they're typically a hard-nosed defense that they're not going to score a ton on offense, but they're going to hit the glass. And to their credit, they're still about 46th in the country with regards to rebound rate. So they have not been lacking there. They should be able to win that battle down low, because you do have a Northern Colorado team that's more around 222nd, though you do have Riley Abercrombie. For one, he does not sell blue jeans, but for two, he's someone that's saying 6'9", but he doesn't give you a lot of on the glass. He does a lot more with regards to three-point shooting. And for Northern Colorado, it is a team that's about 311th in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. But for Sacramento State, they're about 301st. So both of these teams are equally bad on defense. You've got a Northern Colorado team that does a better job of being able to take care of the ball. And this is a Northern Colorado team that, just take a look at the way that this team is scoring right now. They have gotten to at least 81 points in each out of their last 6 games. And for Northern Colorado, this team has been able to exceed the 75-point plateau in all but one of their games since the beginning of the month of December, going up against the Sacramento State team that they've been held to 71 points or fewer in each of their last 5 games. So it's a good old situation if something's got to give. I do think that Northern Colorado is going to bump up the tempo, and I do think that Northern Colorado is going to be able to win this game with the best player out on the floor in St. Thomas. I did set my line at 9. I'm going to be willing to lay the number, and with my total, I did set it at a 153. So look it over, and I'm going to be willing to lay it with Northern Colorado. 797, 798 on the betting board. James Madison is going to be playing us to Louisiana Monroe. Monroe is an underdog of 19 to 19.5 points. Total on this game is between 144 and 144.5. With Monroe, I did set them as underdogs of 22 points. I'm going to be willing to lay this number with Louisiana Monroe. This squad has been, well, not really able to get anything right there. Well, outside the top 300 in terms of points scored on a per possession basis. You've been able to get a little bit out of Tyreek LaCour. He's been a nice double-figure scorer for this team. And then you've got Nika, guy with a really long last name that I'm not even going to try to pronounce, who's also been able to give you about 9.5 to 10 points per contest. But it's just a rudderless bunch that is not shooting it very well from three-point range. They now have to go up against a James Madison team that's literally checking all the boxes. Do recognize that they had that loss against Southern Miss. Against Appalachian State, they weren't able to get it going either. But for James Madison, defense is actually been getting much better as the season goes along. James Madison now a top 26 team in all of college basketball in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. They're able to generate 9.5 steals per contest against a Monroe team that, despite the fact that they play slowly, they turn the ball over 13.5 times per contest. Monroe shoots 64% at the free throw line, 26% from three-point range. You really don't have a lot of rebounding with this team either, and that's typically where you're able to get James Madison. But with TJ Bickerstaff coming in the fold, giving this team 8+ rebounds per game, then has been able to fortify that against a Louisiana Monroe team that they are about 120th with regards to rebound rate, but they're still not going to be able to compare to this James Madison team, one that has been able to get tremendous production out of Terrence Edwards, who's been able to log 17 points per contest. It's just really good balanced scoring out of this James Madison team, as out of your top 5 scorers with regards to anyone that has made at least 1 3, they all shoot between about 33 to 36% from three-point range. So it now looks very sustainable after towards the beginning part of the season. It really wasn't. And for James Madison, top 40 team in terms of possessions per game, only turned the ball over 11.5 times per game. That is incredibly impressive. Going up against a Louisiana Monroe team that has scored 58 points or fewer in 4 out of their last 5 games. And for this Louisiana Monroe team against Division I competition, they had been able to exceed the 70-point plateau just twice thus far this season. Actually, 3 times thus far this season. But man, it has been not so great, to say the least, for them. I do think that James Madison is going to lock them down, and I do think that James Madison is certainly going to be able to provide plenty of offense. I know that they had a rough go against Appalachian State, but I do think that they're going to be able to get it going once again against a Monroe team that, while they've been so lackluster with regards to offense, offensively, this is a team that's well outside the top 250 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. Set my line at 22. I'm going to be willing to lay this number. Set my total at 148. So also looking at the over 799, 800 on the betting board. Michigan is going to be playing against Illinois. Illinois is a favorite of 2.5 points, seeing a straight 3 out there as well. Total on this game is 153.5. Did set Illinois as a 5.5 point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay this number. It is an Illinois team that they've had some dysfunction themselves with Terrence Shannon now being out of the fold, but for Michigan, my goodness gracious, if you know what's going on there, please let me know, because this is just absolute sadness what we've seen out of this program. They've been able to have Duck McDaniel when he's been out there on the floor, because he's now suspended for all road games, be able to give this team a nice little bit of pop. He's been able to do a solid job doling it out with about 5 assists, 17.5 points per game, and honestly, the Michigan offense is just fine. This defense is just getting completely blowtorch, though. In terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, Michigan is currently clocking in 231st, and for Illinois, fully recognize that this team has had their issues on the road. They're still 23rd in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, giving up 16.9 points per 100 possessions in a roadside-shoots corner environment. You've got Olivier Calmel for Michigan, who's able to give you about 7 or so rebounds per game, but the overall balance of rebounding that you've got for Illinois, and this is with attributing for TJ Shannon being out of the fold, it is still tremendous with this team, and you've got each of your top 4 scorers giving you at least 4.3 rebounds per game. I love what Coleman Hawkins has been able to do midseason. 10.5 points, 5.5 boards after a rough 3-point shooting effort to begin the season. The 6'10" gentleman now shooting in the mid-30s from 3-point range. And Marcus Domask has really turned into that do-it-all guy for this Illinois team. He has logged 15-plus points in each of the team's last 4 games, 5-plus assists in 3 of the last 4. Does need to cut down on the turnovers, but he's showing what he was able to show at Southern Illinois. This is a Michigan team that, though the offense has been solid. It is one that is starting to get a little bit inconsistent as well. Michigan has now been held to 73 points or fewer in all 4 of their games here in the month of January, after in December, I believe that they had gotten to at least 75 points in every one of them, so they're starting to get figured out on that front. Nabari Burnett has been able to give you 10 points per game, but you knew that there was going to be inevitable regression with some of the three-point shooting for this Michigan team, and you still have, out of your top 5 scorers that made at least 1 3, 4 of them shooting at least 36.7% from 3, so I do think that that's going to regress even further. I did set my total at a 151.5 with the way that Michigan has been having a fall-off with regards to their scoring. I'm looking at the under, and with Illinois, they've still been able to do a relatively solid job with their defense. I think they get the job done on the road. Going to be willing to lay the number with this Fighting Illini team to go along with this total under as well. 801, 802 on the betting board. It is Tennessee Tech. They're on the road. They're facing off against Tennessee State, and Tennessee State does find themselves as a favorite of 6.5 points. You're finding this total between 142 and 142.5, and did set my total at 143. So I'm going to be willing to lay this number with Tennessee State, as I did set them as a 7-point favorite to go along with the over. And with Tennessee State, this squad has a lot of really good versatility, and they've been able to slow down a little bit more this season. They've been more of a mid-tempo team that has been really relying upon that backcourt, as you've got Christian Brown, Marcus Fitzgerald, pair of guys that have done a solid job with this offense with about 24.5 points between the two of them. Fitzgerald just has not been what he has been in past years. Last 2 seasons, Marcus Fitzgerald 12 plus points per contest as a mid-33 point shooter, shooting just 25% from the outside, and has been dealing with injury, may or may not be able to go in this game. And if he doesn't go, honestly, that's not a bad thing, because you've been able to get far more production out of E.J. Bellinger along Jalen Jones. Pair of guys combined for 23 points, both shooting in that neighborhood about 34 to 36% from 3-point range. But all of a sudden, the Tennessee State defense and their overall ability on glass has been able to improve quite a bit as well. And that because you've been able to get Jason Thibodeau in the fold. He was beginning his career over at Florida, and he's been one of the better shot blockers at the mid-major level in all of college basketball. Currently, he is logging north of 3.2 blocks per contest over the team's last 5 games since his return. He's been able to give the team about 5 boards per contest, 9 points per game. Really like what he's able to do, and Tennessee Tech just doesn't have anyone to be able to match up with him. You've got Daniel Igbanue, who's been able to give you about 6.5 rebounds per game, and when it comes to the Tennessee Tech squad, they're just going to get absolutely lambasted on glass with regards to their overall rebound rate, 342nd in all of college basketball. Not that Tennessee State is any sort of incredible at like 250th, but they certainly do have the nice leg up there. When it comes to this Tennessee Tech team overall, they just are getting completely gashed on defense. In terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, they are currently clocking in 287th. Meanwhile, it's a Tennessee State squad that they're about 223rd. It's not great, but you got Keenan Hodges, a little bit of versatile players, able to give you 10 points, few boards, few steals, and it is a Tennessee State squad that, they've given up fewer than 70 points 2 of their 3 games ever since the turn of the new year. It is a Tennessee Tech squad that they themselves 70 plus points in 4 out of their last 5 games. So I do think that this is going to be a middle of the road sort of game, but I do think that Tennessee State is going to be able to take advantage of the fact that Tennessee Tech not doing the world's greatest job of being able to guard the 3-point arc. Tennessee Tech 227th in all of college basketball in terms of opponents' 3-point shooting percentage, and Tennessee State allowing opponents to shoot just 25% from 3 when they're at home. So this I think is a good spot for Tennessee State. Did set them as a 7-point favorite, so going to be willing to lay the 6.5. And I do think that this is a game that's going to be close enough for late game following, and just with the way the Tennessee Tech is getting gashed, looking at the over. Set my total at a 143, so looking over, and I'm going to be willing to lay the number with Tennessee State. 803, 804 on the betting board. Utah Tech, it's a road face-off against Southern Utah. Southern Utah is a 2.5 to a 3-point favorite, and your total on this game anywhere between 154.5 and 155.5, and I did set Southern Utah as a favorite of 4 points, so I'm going to be willing to lay the number with Utah Tech. This is a team that, once again, is very inefficient with their defense, well outside the top 225 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, and it really just goes to mush for them on the road. At home, they're actually allowing opponents to shoot less than 30% from 3-point range. That ascends to 35.6% in a roadside shoot court environment. Now, good news for them, they go up against the Southern Utah team that's in the bottom 100 with regards to a 3-point shooting percentage, and who've been having quite a few fumbles with regards to this unit. But that said, I do think that they are going to be able to get online, and I do think that you're going to get a little bit more scoring moving forward out of some of the guys that have been a little bit rough to begin the season, because the guy that's really been able to hold it down for them has been Dominique Ford, shooting in the mid-30s from 3-point range. He's been able to give the team 14 points per contest ever since coming over from Idaho, but really past that, it's been a lot of guys that have been sort of hit or miss. You've been hoping for a little bit more out of someone like a Zion Young, who's been able to give you a double-figure amount of points, but his 3-point shooting percentage has been very hit or miss. It's a Southern Utah team that as well has got reinforcements on the way to be able to help out down low, as you've got Jamari Sibley, who's been able to give the team 9 points, 5.5 boards after being taking out the first 10 games of the season. And it is a Southern Utah team that is only turning the ball over 11 times per contest, while Utah Tech north of 15.5 turnovers per game, while shooting 65% at the free throw line. Now, for Utah Tech, they are shooting about 36.5% from three-point range, and they go up against a Southern Utah team that certainly has had their issues defensively, and they're allowing opponents to shoot in that neighborhood about 33.5% from three-point range. That's hovering right around 170th in all of college basketball, but I do think that Southern Utah going to be able to do an okay job on the glass. You've got Pasha Fallah, who's been able to give you about 5.5, 6 rebounds per game. It is not a Utah Tech team that really pads Tanner Christensen, really gives you a lot of rebounding as well for Utah Tech. They're about 192nd in the country with regards to points allowed on a per possession basis, and much of that has been due to the fact that they are giving up a lot of second chances. 296th in all of college basketball with regards to their overall rebound rate. It's a Southern Utah team that's right there with them at 295th, but I do think that Sibley coming back into the fold going to be big for a Southern Utah team that I put relatively on par with Utah Tech, but I do think that the home court advantage going to allow them to win out in this spot. Did semi-total at 152. Got a pair of teams that are really struggling with their offense. Southern Utah bombing it from 3. Utah Tech just holding on to the ball, so looking at the under and willing to lay up to 3.5 with Southern Utah. 805, 806 on the betting board. Southern Indiana plays us a Little Rock. Little Rock does find themselves as 3.5 point road favorites here. Total on this game is 150, and did semi-line at 4. Going to be willing to lay 3.5 and not a half a point more with Little Rock. It's a Little Rock squad that has really been looking to crank up the tempo just in the past few years in general, and this is a Little Rock team that's going to leave something to be desired defensively, especially guarding the perimeter. In a road/corner environment, they're allowing opponents to shoot north of 38% from three-point range, but for Southern Indiana, they just lost everything from last season. Each of their top 5 scorers are now out of the fold, and they just have not been able to recover from that. You've been able to get some good production with 9.5 rebounds down low from A.J. Smith, 13.5 points per game, shoots in the low 30s from three-point range, but a Southern Indiana team that was in the top 50 nationally in terms of three-point shooting percentage last season, turned the ball for 14 times per contest with 30.9% three-point shooting. That's just not cutting it. You've had Jordan Tillman be in and out of the fold. He has not really played since early December, so he's going to be out, and that's a big-time piece that this team was relying upon from the perimeter. As right now you've got one guy on the roster that averages north of 3.5 points per game, shooting above 32% for 3. Jack Melky, 6'7" combo player, has been able to give you 8.5 points, 4.5 rebounds per game, and really sans A.J. Smith, this team has not been able to get anything on the glass as well. Southern Indiana, about 163rd in the country with regards to rebound rate, so it could be worse, but you've got a Little Rock team that they are going to be able to get after you, and you've got Jameer Chaplin, who's really taken some strides forward from when he was over at South Florida a season ago. 17.6 half boards when he was at South Florida, was a sub 25% three-point shooter, shooting 40% from distance this year. For a Little Rock team that's much more efficient with the ball, only turning it over 12 times per contest. Out of your top 6 scorers, you got 5 of them giving you north of 5 rebounds per game. You've also been able to get some relatively good production in terms of a facilitation standpoint from Bradley Douglas, who's been able to give you about 3 assists per game, has been a little bit hampered by injury, but has been able to come back in the fold and has had a combined 36 points in the last 2 games. He's a big-time difference maker for a Little Rock team that gets to go up against a Southern Indiana bunch that, last year they were rough with their defense. This year they are once again rough with regards to that defense, about 191st in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, albeit a team that gives up about 11.1 points fewer per 100 possessions at home rather than in a road/shoot-court environment. But Southern Indiana can really get gas down low with Little Rock having so much versatility, having each of their top 3 scorers as well, give you at least 0.9 blocks per contest as well. I do think that Little Rock going to be able to win from within. Set Little Rock as a 4-point favorite, so going to be one to lay up to 3.5. Got a pair of teams that are looking to play a little bit more up-tempo. Southern Indiana's had to taper off with the pace a little bit from a season ago, but still a squad that certainly has been looking to be able to get up and down. They've been able to score at least 69 points in now 4 of their last 6 games, and it's a Little Rock team has been surrendering a whole bunch of points, 75 plus in each of their last 5. So did set my total 151.5, looking at the over, and I'm going to be one to lay up to 3.5 with Little Rock. 807 to 808 on the betting board. Lindenwood plays us to SIU Edwardsville. Edwardsville is between a 3.5 to a 4-point favorite, and your total, that is 139, and with Edwardsville, did set them as a favorite of 5.5 points. I'm going to be one to lay the number. Edwardsville has been one of the slowest teams in all of college basketball. They were well outside the top 320 in terms of total possessions per game. Problem has been, this has been a defense that has just completely fallen off the wagon this year. 235th in all of college basketball in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, allowing 5.6 points more per 100 possessions than a season ago, but it feels like it's starting to come back for this team. For Edwardsville, they have now given up a grand grand total of 64 points or fewer in 3 out of their last 5 games. They went up against a tough non-conference schedule when it comes to offense, and now that they're hitting OVC play, they've been able to do a much better job defensively, and they go up against a Lindenwood team that, against D1 competition, because they have played their fair of non-D1 teams, they have been able to exceed the 73-point plateau just twice this far this season, so I do think that Lindenwood is going to have all sorts of issues offensively. It's a team that they shoot 26.5% from three-point range with about 12.5 turnovers per game, and they just don't have any sort of a floor general. Darius Bean is right now leading the way with 2.2 assists per game. In terms of assists per made bucket, this is a team that's in the bottom 10 in all of college basketball. You do have Keenan Cole, so able to go into do it all mode, 6'7" combo player, 19 points, 5.5 boards. Lions here shot north of 40% from 3, down to about 22.5% this season, and they're going to have a tough time guarding the Wright brothers, Shamar and Lamar Wright, as they are actually the sons of Lorenzo Wright, the late great Lorenzo Wright. Shamar Wright has been your main scorer, stealing half, shooting 37.5% from 3, 15.5 points per contest, and then Lamar, he gives you 9 points on 37% outside shooting as well. And DeMarco Minor, guy stands just 6 feet tall. He's the only guy on the roster that gives you north of 5 rebounds per game, and he supplies 8.8 rebounds per game. He's actually been able to do a great job with that regard. It's an Edwardsville team that, even though their defense has taken a little bit of a drop off, they've been much more efficient on the offensive end this season, and it's an Edwardsville team that should be able to do a solid job on the glass in this one. They are going up against a bunch in Lindenwood that has had a negative rebound rate all season long. Edwardsville, they're just 251st in all of college basketball with regards to rebound rate, so they've had a little bit of an issue there, but with Lindenwood 329th with this regard, and one of the worst rebounding teams at home in all of college basketball, Edwardsville should be able to get the job done. I do think that Edwardsville going to continue with their improved defense in a game that I think is going to be low possession. Going to be willing to lay up to 5 with Edwardsville, semi-total 135.5, so looking under and looking at Edwardsville, 809, 810 on the betting board. It is New Mexico State playing us to Western Kentucky. Western Kentucky does find themselves in a pick'em game, / as a 1-point underdog. Total on this game is 146.5. Set my line at a 150 in terms of the total. I'm looking at the over, and did make New Mexico State the very slight favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay this number. It is a New Mexico State team that certainly has had their warts all season long. They literally had to replace the entire coaching staff and every single player from the roster a season ago. So Jason Newton, who came over from Sam Houston State, had his hands full, but it does feel like this team is starting to finally find a little bit of cohesion. The turnovers have been a bit unsightly with 13.5 turnovers per game, but Femi Odekale is a guy that's able to take over a game. Gives you 2 assists, 5.5 boards, 11.5 points per contest on 36.5% three-point shooting. It is still a New Mexico State team that's well outside the top 175 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, but now 65 points or fewer surrendered in 3 out of their last 4 games. So they've done a much better job on that front. The offense has really been what's been ailing them. They have failed to exceed 72 points in each of their last 5 games, but I do think that we could be seeing a little bit of turnaround coming for them moving forward and against D1 competition, because they played their fair share of games against non-D1 teams, and games have actually wrapped up in regulation because they've had their 2 biggest scoring outputs come in overtime games, but that said, they have yet to really exceed the 76-point plateau against a D1 opponent all season long. Meanwhile, you've got a Western Kentucky team that they're looking to gut it. They're a team that's in the top 50 in terms of total possessions per game. Now, for Western Kentucky, they're a top 50 team in terms of opponents' three-point shooting percentage, and for Western Kentucky, they've been able to do a relatively solid job defensively. 45th in all of college basketball in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, top 30 team in a road/shoot-record environment. They've been having their hiccups a little bit more on defense, so give it up 68 plus in each of their last 5 games. It is a Western Kentucky team that's got Don McHenry leading the way with 15 points per contest, shooting about 39% for 3, but for Western Kentucky, the little things are eluding them. They do shoot just 68% at the free throw line, about 13.7 turnovers per game as well, so that does leave you a little bit concerned, and this is a New Mexico State team that they're certainly going to give up their open looks. New Mexico State 303rd in the country in terms of opponents' three-point shooting percentage, but a different team when they're out there in the great state of New Mexico. They are at home, allowing opponents to shoot just 27.7% from three-point range, 39.2% in a road/shoot-record environment, and I do think that for Western Kentucky, we're going to see a little bit of regression with the opponent's 26.7% three-point shooting percentage in a road/shoot-record environment. I do think that the turnovers are going to catch up to them just a little bit, along with not necessarily having that guy down low that is really a super rebounder. Brandon Newman right now leading the way with about 6 boards per contest, and I do think that guys like Kalu Azugi are going to be able to hold in there, and that'll allow this New Mexico State team to get the job done on their home floor. I did set my total at 150. I do think that you're going to see an up-tempo game, and I think that you're going to get a little bit of late-game fouling, so looking at the over, and I'm willing to lay up to 1.5 with New Mexico State. 8-11, 8-12 on the betting board. Eastern Washington, it's a road face-off against Weber State. Weber State is a 5.5 to a 6-point favorite with your total 148.5, and with Weber State, I did set them as a favorite of 6.5 points, so you're at the 5.5 to 6. It's really the max I'm willing to lay, but I'm going to be willing to lay it. with Eastern Washington. This team has been absolutely incredible with their three-point shooting percentage. They are a top 20 team in terms of bombing it from three-point range. As a collective, they shoot 38.1% from the outside, but this Weber State team is just a completely different animal at home rather than on the road. Weber State about 187th in the country with regards to opponents' three-point shooting percentage, but allowing opponents to shoot sub 33% from three-point range at home. In Eastern Washington, they have been getting completely grilled on defense outside the top 250 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, allowing opponents to shoot 36.6% from three-point range in a roadside shoot corner environment. Now, they make do with having a pair of guys in Dane Erikstrup along with Cedric Howard, both guys that stand at least 6'6", being able to supply a combined 25.5 points per contest, and both are shooting north of 40% from three-point range. But Eastern Washington also gets a little bit careless with the ball, north of 13 turnovers per game. Meanwhile, it's a Weber State team that's turning the ball over less than 10.5 times per contest. Even though Dylan Jones is having to do it all, 18 points, 10 boards, north of 3 assists per contest, he's got a lot on his plate. He's done a good job of being able to keep things very efficient, going up against an Eastern Washington team that in a roadside shoot your corner environment, they just don't generate a lot of turnovers. Now, it's not like this Weber State team is a heat-seeking missile that's going to be getting a lot of turnovers themselves. Weber State about 140th in the country in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis, but this is a Weber State team that is also now getting some nice ancillary production out of someone like a Blaze Shred, who's been able to give you about 10 points per contest. Steve Verplanken, 13 plus points, doesn't really give you a lot in the way of rebounding or anything like that, but is shooting north of 38% from three-point range, is a good on-ball defender for a Weber State team that as a whole, they're shooting 36.5% from three-point range, shooting 76.5% at the free throw line. They're doing the little things very well. It is an Eastern Washington team that hasn't been able to win 5 straight games, but they have been giving up quite a few points along the way, 79 plus in 2 out of their last 3. Offense has been just a rocket ship. Meanwhile, you've got a Weber State team that's been quite consistent with their defense. I know it doesn't sound like much, but out there in the Big Sky, and they play the Summit League Big Skies Challenge as well, being able to give up 72 points or fewer in pretty much all but 2 of their games since the beginning of the month of December really speaks to me. I did set my total at a 148.5. I do think that Eastern Washington is going to be bumping up the tempo just a little bit. Right now, we're seeing mostly 148.5, but I'm seeing some 149s pop up at a 149. That's my buy point on the under. And with Weber State, willing to lay up to 6 points with them. A 13-8-14 on the betting board. UTEP is going to be playing us Middle Tennessee. Middle Tennessee is a 6.5 point underdog. Totals between 127 and 127.5. With UTEP, I did set them as a favorite of 9 points. So I'm going to be willing to lay the 6.5. It's just a Middle Tennessee team that has not been able to get anything going whatsoever. They're well outside the top 300 in terms of points scored on a per possession basis. And it's not to say that this UTEP team has been doing anything amazing with their offense. They're shooting 31% for 3 with 15 turnovers per game. But you do have a guy in Tay Hardy who's going to be the best player out there on the floor in terms of an offensive production standpoint. 2 steals, 2.5 assists, 14.5 points on 39% three-point shooting. Now, outside of him, for UTEP, you've got one other guy that shoots it relatively well from three-point range, Elijah Jones, 5.5 points, shoots about 36.5% from three-point range, but for UTEP, that's more than what you can say for Middle Tennessee. Middle Tennessee has one guy out there on the floor that gives you north of 5 rebounds per game, Jared Coleman-Jones. It's a Middle Tennessee team turning the ball over 14 times per contest while shooting 27.2% from 3, 65.5% at the free throw line. And it's not even like this team is doing anything amazing on the glass. 246th in all of college basketball with regards to rebound rate. Now they have to go up against the UTEP team that's in the top 20 nationally in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis. Now UTEP, they don't do a great job on the glass either. 298th with regards to rebound rate at the expense of all those turnovers forced. But with this UTEP team, the very least they're able to do a solid job of being able to have some nice fortification there. And when it comes to this Middle Tennessee team, they have lost their last 2 games while giving up approximately 60 points in both of them. That's how bad this offense has been against D1 competition, because against non-D1 teams, they've been able to get it going a little bit more. And if you take a look at regulation only, because they have actually played quite a bit of overtime as well, the last time Middle Tennessee was able to exceed the 68-point plateau, you have to go all the way back to opening night. I mean, good grief. It has been less than tremendous there. At the very least for UTEP, you're able to get to 68 points on the regular, 68 plus in 3 of your last 5 games. For UTEP, I think that they've got enough offense to take it to a Middle Tennessee team that's just been all sorts of sad with regards to their offense. And I mean, defensively, it's not like they've been terrible. They're not generating the turnovers that they have in past years, but in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, it's a team that ranks right around about 126, but giving up about 13.5 points more per 100 possessions away from home. I did set my line at 9. I'm going to be willing to lay the number and semi-total 125. I think the Middle Tennessee going to produce as many turnovers as Sarah Lee's Bakery. Looking at the under, and one to lay it with Utah. 8-15, 8-16 on the main board. Grand Canyon is going to be playing against Utah Valley, and Utah Valley does find themselves as an underdog of 14 to 14.5 points. Total on this game is 139.5. Say Utah Valley as an underdog of 14.5 points. 14 is the absolute max. I'm going to be one to lay, but I'm going to be one to lay it with a team that is going up against a Utah Valley squad that is literally out of 362 Division I teams, 362nd with regards to three-point shooting percentage away from home. I do think that there should be a little bit of shooting positivity for this Utah Valley team, but they just don't have much of a backcourt at this point. Caleb Stone Carrawell, who was an okay player over at Awesome PA a season ago, he's really had to be their top scorer out there in the backcourt, giving you right around about 12, 13 points per contest. Doesn't shoot it badly from three-point range, and then you get about 12 points per contest as well out of Drake Allen. Between the two of these guys, they're shooting below 26% from three-point range, though, and your top three-point shooter right now is Traven Doris, who is the starting center over at Utah State a season ago, who's been solid down low. 7.5 boards, right around 1.4 blocks per contest. It's a Utah Valley team that hasn't been terrible with regards to their defense, but this is a Grand Canyon team that's even better with their defense. They're a top 50 team with regards to rebound rate, with Gabe McLaughlin give you 8+ rebounds per game. Sidney Curry has been able to do a solid job of being able to produce for the team, and for Grand Canyon, they just have one of the best home court environments in all of college basketball, and as a matter of fact, for Grand Canyon, now 32nd in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. You've got a Utah Valley squad that, they don't see a lot of drop-off on the road, and again, they don't do a bad job on the glass, but that lack of backcourt just absolutely kills them. Having to go up against Zion Grant Foster, who's able to give you 20.5 points, 5.5 boards, steal and a half, block and a half per contest. One of the most versatile players that you're going to find in all of college basketball. Rayshawn Harrison has seen a dip in his three-point shooting this year, shooting only about 29% from three with 14 points per contest, but ever since he has come back, Javon Blackshear, he's in a reduced role as pretty much a come off the bench, hit some three sort of guy, but he's shooting about 46.5% from three-point range. He has been absolutely remarkable with that regard, and this is a Utah Valley squad that, they do an okay job with regards to being able to guard inside the arc, with regards to being able to guard the actual arc as well. It has been an okay job from them as well. They're about 225th in the country in terms of opponents' three-point shooting percentage, but they really have their tough times on the road, especially with regards to three-point shooting percentage of the opponents, allowing them to shoot 35.5% from the outside. So I do think that in this ruckus environment, it's going to be tough for Utah Valley to hold in this game. Did semi-line at a 14.5, so one to lay up to 14, and did semi-total 144.5. Again, I think we see a little bit of positivity for this Utah Valley three-point shooting effort, but I think they give it up from three as well. So looking over and going to be one to lay with Grand Canyon, 8-17, 8-18 on the betting board. Battle of Idaho. Idaho hits the road face-off against Idaho St. Idaho St is a 5.5 point favorite. Your total on this game is 133.5. Did set Idaho State as a 6-point favorite. I am going to be willing to lay it with them. Don't want to go any further than the 5.5, but I am willing to lay the 5.5. It is an Idaho team that has been once again well outside the top 200 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. And for Idaho State, they themselves, even though they play very slowly, they are outside the top 300 in terms of total possessions per game. They're outside the top 300 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. But I think the key for this Idaho State team is just being able to do a relatively solid job down low, as they've been able to have someone like a Braden Parker be able to give you 13.5 points, 4.5 boards per contest. Kyrie Huey has been able to give you 6+ rebounds per game, while Julius Mims for Idaho has been able to log about 7.5 rebounds per game. He's really the only guy in the roster that gives you north of 5 boards per contest. Idaho 315th in all of college basketball with regards to rebound rate in a road/neutral court environment, bottom 40 in all of college basketball. And then you've got Quentin Dinker, who's been able to give you about 12 points, shoots about 34% from three-point range. But this Idaho team, they're open for business for allowing opponents to be able to bomb it away from three-point range. Idaho, in terms of their opponent's three-point shooting percentage, they are clocking in 339th in the country, with opponents shooting 37.9% from three-point range. Away from them, it's an Idaho State team that's more around 183rd. So once again, not amazing, but at the same time, you've got the best facilitator out there on the floor for the side of Idaho State, Malik Arrington. So able to give you 4.5 assists per game. Does need to cut down on the turnovers, about 3 per contest, and all in all, Idaho State has been turning the ball over about 12.5 times per game, but been able to get some nice top flight scoring out of this team, with having Miguel Tomley be able to give you 11.5 points, shooting 36% from three-point range. I do think that Idaho State going to be able to win the battle on the glass. They're going to be able to have more outside shooting, and it's an Idaho State team that has been playing much better defensively as well, giving up fewer than 67 points each of their last 3 games. Meanwhile, it's an Idaho team that's given up 75 plus in 4 of their last 5, so I'm going to be willing to lay the number with Idaho State. Made them a 6-point favorite, and did set my total 136. I think you could be close enough for late game following, and though both of these teams are slow, both of these teams are terrible defensively, so looking at the over and going to be willing to lay with Idaho State, 8-19, 8-20 on the betting board. Cal is going to be playing us to Washington, and Washington does find themselves as a 1-point underdog with your total between 155 and 156, and with Cal, I did set them as an underdog of 4 points. I'm going to be looking at Washington outright on the money line. When it comes to the Huskies, it has been an up and down season for them. They are outside the top 100 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, but they've really cranked up their tempo. Top 30 team in terms of total possessions per game. Xavier Wheeler sometimes gets a little bit out of sorts with about 3.5 turnovers per game, but 6.3 assists, logging 16.5 points per game, and helping out Keon Brooks, his former teammate over there at Kentucky, just be the do-it-all scorer for this team. 20 points, 7 boards, shooting about 41% from three-point range. He's been one of the most underrated stories in all of college basketball thus far this season. And then you've got for Washington also Paul Mulcahy, who's able to stuff the stat sheet. Not going to give you a ton of scoring, but 3.8 assists, 5.5 points. Love what he's been able to bring to the table. And then this is a Cal team that has two guys that really just take over a game. That would be Jalen Tyson, Fardaws Amick. Amick is averaging a double-double, 15 points, 10.5 boards, shooting 35.5% from three. It's a 6'11" big man with about a block per contest. And then Tyson, 20.5 points, 7.5 boards. He shoots in the mid-30s from three-point range, but they also combine for about 6 turnovers per game. It's just been a really less than efficient Cal team. As I was talking about Washington having some doldrums on defense, this is a Cal team that in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, 249th in all of college basketball. That has been a big, giant issue. They've been trying to reacclimate Jalen Celestine into the starting lineup. Devin Askew, he's been in and out of the fold. He's been in, he's been out. It's been really, really rough for him as well. And this is a Cal team that, despite the fact that you've got Amick down low, it's not like they're doing an amazing job on the glass. They're about 118th in all of college basketball with regards to rebound rate. Washington more in that pocket, about 132nd, so they're not going to be overwhelmed there. It has been a Cal team that has been very hit or miss with regards to their three-point shooting as well, at about 34.5% from the outside, and that has been a big issue for Cal. Not necessarily their personal three-point shooting, but the fact that opponents, they are really able to light it up against them. They are 323rd in all of college basketball with regards to opponents' three-point shooting percentage. Meanwhile, you've got a Washington team that they certainly have their issues on defense as well, but they're more around 93rd in the country, allowing opponents to shoot 32% from three-point range. So I do think that you get quite a bit of an up and down game with the way that Washington has bumped up their tempo, but I think we've gone a little bit too far. Did set my total 154. I think that both of these teams have just a few too many turnovers to go over, but like Washington, to be able to get the outright win, I'm going to be willing to take Washington on the money line, set them as a 4-point favorite, and the under 821, 822 is the DK Network right up pick. Let's try to stay hot with these. Utah is going to be playing us at Oregon State. Oregon State is an underdog of 15 points, and your total on this game are between 143.5 and 144. My right up here is going to be on the under. We last 2 days went with over, so we're going to mix it up a little bit by going with the under, and I think the biggest thing that you need to know with Oregon State is that their offensive numbers, if you look at just raw like points per game, rebounds per game, everything like that, they're as warped as any in all of college basketball because they have played 30 more minutes than what they should have. They have played 2 games that went to a single overtime. They played a game that went to double overtime. So that is a big, giant issue when it comes to gauging this team. So you've got to do it on a per possession basis. And this is just not a team that is really going to do their part with this total. It's an Oregon State team that, in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, are about 168th. That's about average in all of college basketball. It certainly hikes up when they are on the road / in a neutral court. And we'll get to Utah's home and road splits in a second. But the Beavers, 230th in the country in terms of points scored on a per possession basis, and with their three-point shooting percentage, it sees an almighty fall-off when they leave home, as they are, in terms of three-point shooting percentage, shooting 37.2% at home, 26.6% away from home. That ranks 336th nationally. This is a Beavers team that also has to go up against a Utah team that's allowing 30.8 points fewer per 100 possessions at home rather than in a road / neutral court environment. So that is an almighty issue for them. You've got an Oregon State team that, if you take out the overtimes, if you look at just regulation and regulation only for all these teams, they'd be ranking outside the top 250 in terms of total possessions per game. With the overtime thrown in, that's more around 167. So that's very much warped as well. And you've got a Utah team that's been slowing it down as well. Last 3 games, they've been playing at a rate of about 12 possessions per game fewer than the rest of the season. You've got an Oregon State team that's 303rd in the country in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis. And let's call it what it is. This is an Oregon State team that they really rely upon one main scorer. That'd be Jordan Pope, who's been tremendous for this team. He's been able to give the team 18 points per contest, 3.5 assists, shooting 38.5% from three-point range, 20 plus points in each of the last 4 games. But again, those numbers are very much warped by the fact that they have been playing so much overtime. You've got a Utah team that they themselves have been very much all over the place with regards to their defense. They have given up north of 79 points in 4 of their last 5 games, but most of those games have either been on the road or they played against a Washington team that's just running it and gunning it. And for Utah, they're dealing with a little bit of an injury to Raleigh Worcester, their main point guard who missed the last game, 5.5 assists, 7 points per contest. Got to feel like the offense is going to be a little bit more disjointed if he can't go. And it is a Utah team that they only shoot about 67.5% at the free throw line, but do shoot 38% from 3-point range. Brandon Carlson, 17 points, right around about 7 boards per contest. He's been able to shoot it very well from 3-point range, and that's much of the reason why I did set Utah as a relatively sizable favorite. I did set them at 14.5. I do think that once you get to 15, it's gone a little bit too far, just because I do think that Worcester injury is going to be hurting them quite a bit. And for Utah, their 3-point shooting defense, much different at home rather than on the road, allowing opponents to shoot just 29% from 3-point range at home in a road/neutral court environment. That goes up to 39.5%. So I do think that Oregon State, with not having a lot around Jordan Pope, you've had Dexter O'Connell be able to give you double figures. Now on the flip side, Gabe Madsen has been a really good scorer as well for Utah, shooting 45% from 3-point range. He's going to be a little bit of an issue for Oregon State to defend against, but for Oregon State, getting a little bit more with regards to their rebounding. You've got Casey Abakwe, Michael Rotage, along with Tyler Bladue, who have all been able to give between 5 and 5.8 rebounds per game, but this is an Oregon State team that has been one of the worst in all of college basketball, being able to get a second chance in a roadside-neutral court environment, rebounding 20.1% of their misses away from home. That's outside the top 300. So I think that you get a low-scoring slog in this one with an Oregon State team whose numbers are very much warped by overtime. So set my total 134.5. My DK network write-up is on the under. And with Utah, set them as a 14.5-point favorite. So here at 15 plus, going to be taking the points with the Beavs. 823, 824 on the betting board. UC Irvine, Zots off for the Anteaters. They play us to UC San Diego. San Diego does find themselves as an underdog of 5.5 points. 139 to 139.5 is your total. And for UC Irvine, I did set them as a favorite of 7 points. I'm going to be one to lay this number. It's a San Diego team that certainly has been able to come alive with their defense in recent games. And Bryce Pope has been a tremendous scorer, being able to register about 18.5 points per contest, mid-30s 3-point shooter for a UC San Diego team that has been able to get some relatively good production down low out of Nadiwana Tayat Jones, who's been able to give you about 5 boards per contest. Now, they've been dealing with quite a few injuries. Emmanuel Shuminga has been a little bit in and out of the fold, but now you've got Tyler McGee back, who's been just a do-it-all scorer for the team. In 7 games back with the team, he's been able to log about 14.5 points per contest, and in the games that Tyler McGee has played in, they have gotten to at least 75 points in all but one of them. So that's certainly something that does factor into this line of 141 with the total. I'm looking at the over, and for UC Irvine, that's been a team that has slowed down a little bit more ever since conference play has began, as they've been able to just stick teams into the mud. As if you look at regulation only, the UC Davis game, that went to overtime. So regulation and regulation only, this team has allowed fewer than 67 points in each of the last 6 games, but they do such a good job with being able to flow efficient offense. You've got Justin Owen, your main scorer, giving you 14 points per contest for a UC Irvine team that they do shoot 37% from 3-point range, and it's an Irvine team that very much does benefit from being at home. If you take a look at them at home as opposed to in a roadside-neutral court environment, averaging 17.5 points more per 100 possessions when they are at home, going up against a UC San Diego team that is not a top 80 team in terms of points scored on a per possession basis. But for Irvine, this team has been able to do a pretty tremendous job of being able to rebound by committee as well, not allow a lot of second chances. 7 tills, big reason why, 6.5 boards, 9.5 points per game. And I do think that this is going to be a clean game with Pierre Cockrell doing a good job doling out the ball, giving out 6 assists, only scores about 7 points per contest, but with Irvine shooting the way that they are from 3-point range, and UC San Diego being prone to really giving up some open looks from 3-point range. This is a UC San Diego team that, in terms of opponents' 3-point shooting percentage, they have been clocking in right around about 236th in all of college basketball. Irvine, they are allowing opponents to shoot only about 32.2% from 3-point range. I do think that that gives Irvine the upper hand in a game I could see some late game fouling coming through on, and it's a pair of teams that they don't necessarily play super fast, but they play very efficiently with their offense. So I did set my total 141, looking at the over, and with Irvine, I'm going to be willing to lay up to 6.5 with them. 825, 826 on the betting board. UC Davis is the road face-off against Cal State Fullerton. With Fullerton, they are a underdog of 2 points. Your total is between 133 and 134. With Fullerton, I did make them the underdog of 4.5 points. So I'm going to be willing to lay it with UC Davis. UC Davis has actually been a top 100 team in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, and they do a nice job of cutting off the 3-point arc with opponents opponents, shooting just 31.5% from distance. So I will say that has not been the forte of Cal State Fullerton all season long. For Fullerton, they have really been trying to reacclimate after so many losses were taken in the offseason for this team. You've still got Max Jones in the fold, who's been able to give you about 16.5 points per contest, but it's a Fullerton team that they turn the ball over 13 times per contest. They're well outside the top 200 in terms of points scored on a per possession basis. They're a squad that has been just not being able to take care of the ball. Dominic Bruton has come in, giving the team 14.5 points per game. And Troy San Antonio, since he's returned, he was missing for the first about 9 or so games of the season. He's been able to give you about 8 points per game, but you just need a little bit more from a Fullerton team that doesn't have a single guy on the team that's averaging north of 5 rebounds per game. For Cal State Fullerton, typically this is a team that does a solid job on the glass. They're first in the country with regards to rebound rate. They go up against a UC San Diego team that is very top-heavy, as you've had Elijah Pepper doing it all, 22-plus points, 5-plus boards. He gives out 3 assists, but for the Davis team, at the very least, they provide a little bit of help defensively for them to be such a good force out there. You've got Nico Rokac, who's been able to give you about 5 boards per contest, and I like Ty Johnson. He's been a good Robin for this team, 16 points, 4 boards, 3.5 assists, shoots 37.5% from three-point range. It is a Davis team that, as a whole, they do shoot about 36.5% from the outside. The 14.5 turnovers per game has not been amazing, to say the least, but that said, you're going up against a Fullerton team that they have not been able to do a good job of being able to generate turnovers as well, and I do think that it's a case where UC Davis is going to be able to take it to Cal State Fullerton. Did semi total 136.5. Do you think that you're going to be close enough for a late game following year? And it's a Davis team that has really been able to crank up their offense as well. This team has been able to get to at least 71 points and now each of their last 7 games. Meanwhile, you've got a Fullerton team that they themselves have surrendered at least 75 in 4 out of their last 5 games. So looking at the over, and I'm going to be willing to lay with UC Davis. 827, 828 on the betting board. Pepperdine is going to be playing against Gonzaga. Gonzaga does find themselves as 12.5 point road favorites. Here's your on this game between 157 and 157.5. Did set my line at 12.5 as well. This is going to be a little bit more of a wait and see mode game for me, as the opener in a lot of places was also 12.5. So if we can get to 12 or less, I'm going to be willing to lay with Gonzaga. 13 or more, I'm going to be willing to take the points, as this is a Pepperdine squad that now has Javon Porter back in the fold. As Javon Porter, he's actually of relation to Michael Porter of the Denver Nuggets, and he's someone that's saying 6'8". He's able to pop some threes, lends some pretty solid versatility, but they go up against a Gonzaga team that you got to feel like after they were dropped from the polls, this is going to be a team that's going to be very, very hungry to get a little bit of vengeance. Question is, are they good enough to be able to get that vengeance? In this spot, I think yes. Anton Watson, Graham Ike combining for about 29.5 points per contest between the two of them, shooting 38.5% from 3, and that's a big thing with this Gonzaga team. They're only shooting about 31.7% from 3-point range, and the real issue has been Ryan Nembhard. 2.6 turnovers per contest while shooting less than 25% from 3-point range. You knew he wouldn't be the most explosive scorer on the team, but you're expecting a little bit more here, and Gonzaga's actually been better defensively this year than they were a season ago. They're actually allowing about 6.5 points fewer per 100 possessions this year than a season ago. They are in the top 50 nationally in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, and Pepperdine, even though they've slowed down their tempo a little bit, this is still a team that's just getting absolutely crushed on the defensive side of things. 337th in all of college basketball in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. So you've got Houston Mallett along with Michael Ajay, who have been able to combine for 35 points per contest, and Ajay continues to shoot 50% from 3. I think that we were going to see a little bit of a fall off there, but with this Pepperdine team, they should be able to help this Gonzaga team get right back online with regards to their outside shooting, as for Pepperdine, they are 356th in all of college basketball with regards to opponent's 3-point shooting percentage. I do think that Gonzaga going to be able to get up off the mat, and like I said, this is a Gonzaga team that they're not quite the same offensively this year, but they're better defensively, so I did set my total 156.5 here to 157, 157.5, diving under with Gonzaga. They open up a 12-point favorite, seeing a few straight 12s out there, and I'm willing to lay up to 12 with them. 829, 830 on the betting board. It is Pacific. They play us to Santa Clara. Santa Clara does find themselves as 12.5 point favorites. Your total odds in this game is 147.5. Not often that I'm willing to lay 12.5 points on the road in conference, but going to be willing to do it. Santa Clara. Set them as 15.5 point favorites. Do recognize that their game against St. Mary's was very much less than savory, but good gosh almighty, this Pacific team is awful. A team that is outside the top 275 in terms of both points scored and points allowed on a per possession basis. With this Pacific team, you just have absolutely no rebounding whatsoever with this team, as well as you've really got one guy that gives you north of 5 rebounds per game on the roster, as just up and down the boulevard. You're looking for anyone to be able to give you production. They've been able to have Nick Blake, the UNLV transfer, give you 10.5 points per contest, but he's been out on the fold. He's been banged up. Team is shooting 31.5% from three, 62% at the free throw line. Judson Martindale, say we give you about 10 points per contest, but one guy giving you north of 4.5 rebounds per game is Cam Denson with 8.5 points per game. You've been able to actually have a facilitator, Mo Odom, give you about 4.8 assists to only about 2 turnovers per game, so he's done a relatively solid job there, but that's it. You've got not a lot of anything going for the team, and for Santa Clara, you've got all sorts of size down low for the team. Christoph Tilley, he's a true 7-footer. He's been in and out of the fold a little bit. I think that he should be good to go for this one, even if not. You still have Johnny O'Neal, true 6'10" gentleman that shooting north of 30% from 3, 9 points, 5 boards per contest, and then Adama Ball, Carlos Marshall. These two guys have been able to combine for about 28.5 points per game. Both guys combined to shoot about 41% from 3, and keep this in mind with Santa Clara. They've already knocked off 3 Pac-12 teams. They've already knocked off Gonzaga as well. Granted, a very much diminished Gonzaga team, but they've been able to do a solid job on that front. It is a Santa Clara team that also ranks in the top 100 in terms of opponents' 3-point shooting percentage, so they're going to do a good job cutting off the arc from a team that can't rebound to save their lives. I think that this turns into domination. Set Santa Clara as a 15.5 point favorite, going to be one to lay the number, and it's up my total at 145.5, simply because with this Pacific team, I don't think that they're going to do their part with this total. It's been very tough sledding for them, and this is a Santa Clara team that they themselves are playing a little bit more slowly this year. So looking at the under, and I'm going to be one to lay it with Santa Clara. 831, 832 on the betting board. Long Beach State plays with Hawaii. Hawaii does find themselves as a underdog of 1.5 to 2 points. Total is 148, and I did set my line at 5. I'm going to be one to lay the number. Always have to handicap Hawaii just a little bit differently when they're away from the island, and I do have a little bit of trepidation in this spot going up against a Long Beach State team that you've got a pair of guys in the Traores who have been able to do a tremendous job down low. Lucina Traore, more of a low post specialist, 12 points, 10 rebounds per contest, and then Abakar Traore, he's been able to do an amazing job giving you 13 points, 8 boards, 4 assists, not really going to pop threes, and this is a Long Beach State team that they always have an issue with regards to their 3-point shooting percent, shooting just 30.2% as a collective, but they do a nice job being able to generate right around about 9 steals per game, and this is a Hawaii team that one of their fortes is being able to guard the 3-point arc. They've been a top 125 team over the last 2 seasons in terms of opponents' 3-point shooting percentage, and they do get quite a bit down low. The 7-footer Mosek is able to give you about a block or so per contest. You'll be able to get some relatively solid production out there in the backcourt as well, with Justin McCoy being able to shoot 40% from 3-point range, relatively versatile guy, right around 6'6", 6'7", who's been able to haul in there about 5.5, 6 boards per contest, go along with his 7.5 points per game, and Bernardo da Silva about 11 points, 7 rebounds per game. But for Hawaii, they're now only shooting about 32.5% from 3-point range, fewer than 70 points in now 6 out of their last 8 games. They've had some big giant issues there, and it's a Hawaii team that, in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, they're actually 63rd in college basketball, but they only give up about 1.2 points more per 100 possessions in a roadside-court environment rather than at home. Their offense has not traveled at all. Their defense has actually done a relatively solid job of being able to travel, but this is a Hawaii team that I do think that they're just going to be suffering from not having enough size to be able to match up with the Traores. I think that they're going to lose the battle on the glass. A game that I do think is going to be relatively nip and tuck, close enough for late game fouling, and Long Beach State, they just seem to speed everyone that they play up. So I did set my total at a 149, especially with this Hawaii team being one that's been a little bit hot and cold from 3-point range. I do think that Noel Coleman, who's giving you 13.5 points per game, is going to ascend against the Long Beach State team that's given up at least 75 points in each of their last 5 games. So to set my total at 149, looking at the over, and going to be one to lay the number with Long Beach State, set them as a 5-point favorite. It's 833, 834 on the betting board. It is UC Santa Barbara, and they're on the road facing off against Cal State Northridge. CSUN finds themselves as 2 to 2.5 point favorites. Total on this game is between 155 and 155.5. CSUN has failed to cover in just 2 games this far this season. I think they keep it going. I set CSUN as a 3.5 point favorite. I'm going to be one to lay this number. This Cal State Northridge team has just been absolutely tremendous. I do think that they made a tremendous hire bringing in Andy Newman from Cal State Bernardino, who's really been able to elevate this team. This is a CSUN team that is a top 50 team with regards to rebound rate. They're a top 75 team in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. Do need to clean up those 15 turnovers per game. That is a little bit of an issue that you've got with this team, but Deontay Bostic, Deshaun Allen Ikens, they've been able to combine for about 34 points per contest, and they go up against a UC Santa Barbara team that typically this is a team that they do a great job locking you down on defense. Typically they're playing at a little bit more of a slow tempo tempo, but they're efficient on offense. And you saw of A.J. Mitchell, who's able to shoot darn near 40% from three-point range, logging 20 points per contest. But for the Santa Barbara team, in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, this is where the real issue is. They are 175th in all of college basketball, ironically enough, giving up 3.2 points fewer per 100 possessions when they're away from home rather than when they are at home. But I was expecting Juan Traore to be able to do a little bit more on the glass. He's been a solid offensive player. He's been able to give you 15 plus points per contest, but only about 5 boards per contest. That's left it all to Ariel Bland. And when you've got Keontae Jones on the flip side for CSUN doing all that he's doing with about 13 points, 2.5 assists per contest, that's big. And now you've got G.N.I. Hunt, two-time transfer that was on the full for the first 11 games of the season, helping out with CSUN, being able to cut down on those turnovers, give out about 3.5 assists per game, just give this offense a little bit more flow in general. And ever since Hunt has been in the fold, this is a CSUN team that has been able to score at least 75 points in every single game since he has been out there, and the defense has still been a constant. 73 points or fewer surrendered in 4 of their last 5 games. It is a CSUN team that is also going up against a UC Santa Barbara bunch that they themselves give up 75 plus points in 3 of their last 5 games. So very interesting circumstance with a CSUN team that does rank in the top 50 in terms of total possessions per game. I did set my total 151.5. I do think that Santa Barbara are going to play a little bit better defensively as they have on the road all season long, so looking at the under, but with CSUN going to be willing to lay the number. I think that they win from within, willing to lay up to 3 with CSUN. 835, 836 on the betting board. UC Riverside hits the road face off against Cal State Bakersfield. Meet for the Road Runners, who find themselves as a pick-up to a 1-point favorite, and your total on this game, it is 135, and with Bakersfield, I did set them as a 3-point underdog. I'm going to be looking at UC Riverside outright on the money line. It is a Bakersfield team that they play slowly, but they don't necessarily play great defense. They are well outside the top 275 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. And when it comes to this Bakersfield team, it just is a bunch that relies a little bit too much on their main guy in Caleb Higgins, who's been rock solid. He's been able to give the team 17 points per contest. He's been able to do a solid job giving you some boards, giving you a steal or 2 per game, but you just need a little bit more for this team, and they're completely lacking that. Meanwhile, you've got a UC Riverside team that's been a whole is greater than the sum of its parts approach. They're one of the best teams in all of college basketball, not turning the ball over, only about 9.6 turnovers per game, with having a pair of guys in Isaiah Moses, Barrington Hargris, be able to combine for about 24 points. They give out 8.5 assists to about 3.2 turnovers per game. Now, with Riverside, they only shoot about 30% from three-point range. They don't necessarily have anyone down low that's able to dominate the game. Kyle Owens has been able to give you about 4.5 rebounds per game, but for Riverside, they have been one of your lesser teams defensively as well, outside the top 250 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis as well. So Missouri does have company there, but this is also a Riverside team that they just do a good job being able to execute those little things. Meanwhile, for Bakersfield, it's been a little bit more of an issue for them, and where Bakersfield can really be hurt is along the perimeter. You do have Modestus Concretes, who's able to give you about 4.5 to 5 rebounds per game to be able to help things out with that regard. But when it comes to this Bakersfield team, 304th in all of college basketball with regards to opponents' three-point shooting percentage, allowing opponents at home to shoot 43% from three-point range. I think it's doomsday for them. So I did set Riverside as a 3-point favorite. I'm going to be willing to take them outright on the money line on the road. Pair of teams outside the top 250 in terms of total possessions per game. I think that you get a slowed down slog, especially with a Bakersfield team that just has not been able to score a lot in general. Neither of these teams going to get a lot of second chances. So did set my total at 133, diving in on the under and looking at Riverside on the money line. 837, 838 on the betting board. Portland is going to be playing up to San Diego. San Diego does find themselves as a 3-point underdog. Totals between 155 and 155.5, with San Diego set them as a 2.5-point underdog. So here at the 3, it's my minimum buy point on them, but I'm going to be taking a look at the 3 with the San Diego Toreros. With San Diego, this team has not been able to do a great job down low all season long, but Portland is well outside the top 275 in terms of rebound rate. Both teams have reinforcements coming in, as you've got Yatu Yamanachi Williams, who comes over from the Southland, 11.5 points, 7.7 rebounds per game in the 3 games that he's been back in the fold. And for San Diego, for the longest of time, they were without their main big man in Steven Jamerson II, 6'10" gentleman that has been able to give you about 7.5 boards per contest. So that should be able to help out both of these teams on the glass. But you've got Deuce Turner along with Wayne McKinney, the third for San Diego, being able to combine to shoot about 36.5% from three-point range. Both of these guys give you 14.5 points per game, and both of these teams are part of really bad defenses. But the San Diego defense, in my opinion, is just far better than that of Portland. Portland has not been able to do anything right on defense. 331st in all of college basketball in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. Now, Now, I will give Portland this. They're giving up 22 points fewer per 100 possessions at home rather than in a roadside-court environment. Meanwhile, San Diego, they're about 188th. They're giving up 10.2 points more per 100 possessions when they leave home, and it is a Portland team that they've got some okay three-point shooting. They shoot 33% from three. Tyler Harris, Tyler Robertson, the two Tylers have been able to combine for about 29 points per contest. Robertson does it all at about 6'6", 4 boards, 4 assists, so I like what he's been able to do, but this is also a very inefficient Portland team in that they turn the ball over to near 14 times per contest as well. You've got Alamami Karama chipping in their 4 boards, 9.5 points per game, but really without Yamanaki Williams, Tyler Harris was the only guy giving you north of 4.2 rebounds per game. Just feels like you've got a little bit more versatility with the San Diego team that's been getting crushed defensively against D1 opponents. This is a San Diego team that they have now given up 80 plus points in each of their last 4 games. Meanwhile, it's a Portland team that they've really went through some issues with their offense. They have scored 70 points or fewer in 3 of their last 4 games while giving up 95 plus and now 3 out of their last 5. So something's got to give here. I did set my total at 156.5. I think that both of these defenses are going to just flat out stink in this game, and I did think that you get some late game fouling, so looking at the over and at 3 plus, going to be taking a look at the points with San Diego. 839, 840 on the betting board. It is Oregon. They hit the road. They're facing off against Colorado. Colorado does find themselves as a favorite of between 6 and 6.5 points. Total on this game is 148.5. Did set my total at 150. I'm going to be taking a look at the over. This is an Oregon squad that has won just one time since they have joined the Pac-12 on the road against Colorado. I don't think that this is going to be number 2. It is a Colorado team that has had some tough goes of it in recent games. A lot of that has been because they've been dealing with some injuries with guys like Tristan De Silva out of the fold, but now you get Cody Williams back as well. He's been able to give the team double figures in every single one of the games since he's been back in the fold. Colorado's a top 50 team with regards to rebound rate as well, going up against an Oregon team that they're still without Nate Biddle. They're still without Mr. Infali Dante, who he's been back for 2 games this far this season. He actually did return in that game against Cal, but he only played 17 minutes. He had 2 rebounds, so he is back. I correct my statement there, but that said, you got to wonder what you're going to be able to get moving forward, and perhaps he re-injured himself again, because that's just what happens with Infali Dante. You can't trust in that whatsoever, so I'm going to be willing to lay the number with Colorado. It is an Oregon team, though, that that Jackson Shell said is going to be out there, and he's been tremendous. 3 assists. He's been able to shoot north of 40% from 3-point range for an Oregon team that has been much better offensively this season. They're only turning the ball over about 10.5 times per contest. They're shooting as a collective north of 36% from 3-point range. Jermaine Cuisinart, with having Selstad helping him out, is able to freelance a little bit more on defense. He's been able to get 2 steals per contest, so it is an Oregon team that is well outside the top 75 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. So Oregon now about 60th in all of college basketball in terms of points scored on a per possession basis, but we know that Colorado is a much better team at home rather than on the road, averaging about 15.5 points more per 100 possessions at home rather than in a roadside court environment. And Colorado has been a little bit all over the place with regards to their defense. At home, there has been no question marks with this defense. So in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, they're giving up about 17 points fewer when they are at home. It's a spot where I do think that Kerry Oquendo is going to struggle a little bit, as shot about 40.5% from 3-point range with 10.5 points per contest, but wonder if we're going to see a little bit of regression here. 5 points or fewer scored in 3 of his last 4 games, so he's really been scuffling as well. And then KJ Simpson is just a do-it-all player for this Colorado team that is going to be able to dominate. 4 assists, 5 boards, 2 steals, shooting 46% from 3-point range. So with Colorado, did set them as an 8-point favorite. I think that they saw Oregon's number. It did set my total at 150, so loan over, and I'm going to be willing to lay it with Colorado. 841, 842 on the betting board. Loyola Marymount is going to be on the road facing off against San Francisco. The Dons of San Francisco find themselves as 11 to 11.5 point favorites, and your total on this game, it is 138, and with San Francisco, did set them as favorites of 11.5 points. At an 11, that's a max I'm going to be willing to lay, but I'm going to be willing to lay it with this San Francisco bunch. They're now a top 20 team nationally in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. Would like to see them cut down on the turnovers just a little bit, but that said, this is a San Francisco team that has been able to get a lot of production down low with a top 50 rebound rate, despite having only one player giving you north of 3.5 rebounds per game. Jonathan Mogbo, 15 points, 11 boards, 3.5 assists. You've got a 40% 3-point shooter who's really elevated this offense, and Malik Thomas, who's been able to throw in there 11.5 points per game, and that's allowed Marcus Williams to be a little bit more clean with the ball as well. 3.5 assists, 14 points per contest. The turnovers do seem to be falling just a little bit for the San Francisco team, and they go against a Loyola Marymount team that they are one of the worst teams in all of college basketball, being able to force turnovers. So that is not going to be an issue here. Now, with Loyola Marymount, they're quite efficient with the ball as well, as they've got Justin Wright, who has been Mr. Wright. He spent some time over at Murray State along with LSU, has never had more than 2 turnovers per game for the entirety of his season. 11.5 points, 1.4 turnovers, done a solid job being able to dole out the ball. And then Justice Hill is who I was talking about a little bit before, coming over from LSU and Murray State. He's been able to give you 4.2 assists, 1.6 turnovers per game, but You've also got Dominic Harris, so able to shoot 41% from three-point range, 14.5 points per contest, but you don't have anything down low for this LMU team. You've got Alex Merkfeldes, he's been able to give you right around 6 rebounds per game, and despite the fact that San Francisco just has the one player, Mogbo, who's been giving you north of 3.5 rebounds per game, they do a good job of as a collective of being able to hit the glass. Leo Marymount, they're more around 78th in the country with regards to their overall rebound rate, as you just have not been able to get the same production out of Kelly Leo Pepe this year as you have in past years. 9.5 points, 5 boards. He last season was able to shoot 43.5% per three with 13.5 points per contest. Has picked it up a little bit more recently. 6+ rebounds in each of the last 3 games. He's logged 11+ points in 4 of the last 5 games, but he's just been a little bit all over the place. And this is an LMU team that has fallen on some tough times with their offense, scoring 67 points or fewer for their last 5 games. Now they have to go up against just an incinerator of a San Francisco team that has been completely crushing teams with regards to their defense, giving up 72 points or fewer, and now 11 out of their last 12 games. I do think that they're going to be able to hold up here, so it is a circumstance where I did set San Francisco as an 11.5 point favorite, one to lay up to 11, and did set my total 135.5. Looking at the under, this is the last game on the normal Las Vegas betting board before we hit the extra games. 843, 844, Sanford plays us to Washington State. Washington State does find themselves as a 2.5 to a 3-point underdog with your total 144.5, and with Washington State did set them as an underdog of 2 points. So I'm going to be willing to take the 2.5 with a Washington State team that certainly has had some home and road splits when it comes to their games on the road. Washington State, in terms of points allowed on a per 100 possession basis, that has been going up by about 6 or so, though they're able to relatively maintain compared to most of college basketball. Top 55 team with regards to points allowed on a per possession basis, and this is a Sanford team that has been dealing with an injury to their main facilitator in Jared Bynum, a guy that ranks in the top 15 nationally with regards to assists per game with right around 7, and it is a Sanford team that has been a wreck on defense. 164th nationally in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. It is Washington State team that it's not like they do an amazing job of being able to fire it in there from 3-point range or anything like that, but we've been continuing to get good production out of Isaac Jones along with Miles Rice. Pair of guys they'll be able to combine for 30 points per contest. Jones doesn't give you anything from the outside, but he does log about 7.5 rebounds per game. Andre Yagmowski at 6'9" has been able to pop a few threes, and they go up against a Sanford team that certainly has been prone to giving up some big performances from the outside. Sanford 278th in all of college basketball with regards to opponents' 3-point shooting percentage. Meanwhile, this is a Washington State team that from their perimeter, they're allowing opponents to shoot just 30.3% from 3-point range in a road/shoot-record environment, and I think that that's going to really bog down a Sanford team that has been their lifeblood. Being able to hit so many threes, you've had Maximine Reynaud be your main low post presence with about 14 points, 9 boards per contest, and then you just take a look at Cannon Carlisle coming in 8 games, 14 points per contest, shooting 43% from 3. It's been ridiculous, and if you take Reynaud out of the fold, each of your top 5 scorers for Stanford all shoot at least 40% from 3-point range, but I do think that Washington State is going to be able to bog them down. It's a Washington State team looking to play slow and controlled. It's a Stanford team that's looking to kick up the tempo, but I do think that the injury that you do currently have to Bynum going to be a big difference maker that allows Washington State to hold in this game. Don't want Washington State outright on the money line, but anything north of 2 going to be taking the points at set by total 144, so also diving in on the under. Now we hit the extra games.
The normal betting board picks are complete, but there are some extra games today, so we go into the bonus.
306-519, 306-520. Binghamton is going to be playing us Vermont. Vermont just find themselves as 7-point favorites, open up at 6. Total on this game is 142.5, and I did set Vermont as a 7.5 point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay the number. It's a Vermont team that does rank outside the top 175 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, but Vermont, year in and year out, they're one of the most efficient offenses in conference in all of college basketball. They typically just outgun teams, and we're starting to see that once again. Vermont has crept back into the top 100 in terms of points scored on a per possession basis. Would like to see a little bit more down low out of Matt Verrado. He's standing 6'8", only gives you about 2.5 rebounds per game, but 11.5 points on 38.5% 3-point shooting. It is a Vermont team that they only turn the ball over 9 times per contest. Part of that is because they're a bottom 20 team with regards to total possessions per game of Vermont, 260th in the country in terms of opponents' 3-point shooting percentage, but they do go up against a Binghamton team that they certainly have been prone to giving up some wide open looks. Binghamton 307th in all of college basketball with regards to opponents' 3-point shooting percentage. You've had TJ Long shoot 40% from 3, 13 points per contest, and for Binghamton, what I do like for this team is Samir Torrance. He does it all, 9 points, 6 boards, 7 assists, shoots 38.5% from 3-point range, but this Binghamton team against C1 competition has been getting gashed. 77 plus points surrendered each of their last 3 games. You got Timo Chenery, who comes in from Quinnipiac, 14.5 points, shooting about 31.5% from 3, and that's where you need to hurt this Vermont team. They're not good at guarding the arc. For the collective, Binghamton shooting 31% from 3, 66% at the free throw line. I just don't think that they execute well enough on offense to be able to get the job done. Now, good news for Binghamton is that each of your top 5 scorers do log at least 4 rebounds per game. Bad news for Binghamton is that they go up against a Vermont team that does a relatively solid job of not allowing for second chances as well, even though Binghamton top 115 team with regards to rebound rate. So I did set my line at 7.5, 1 to lay up to 7 with Vermont, and did set my total at 137.5. Vermont, I do think is going to be playing that slow, grimy style, and when they get in conference, the Vermont defense typically kicks up. They've now given up 70 points or fewer in 4 of their last 5 games. So looking at the under and 1 to lay with Vermont, 306-521, 306-522. It is Albany playing us to UMass Lowell. Lowell is a favorite of a point. Total on this game is 155, and set UMass Lowell is a 3.5 point favorite. I'm going to be 1 to lay the number. UMass Lowell is once again a top 40 team with regards to rebound rate. This is despite the fact that throughout much of the season, Abdul Kareem Koulibaly, one of their top rebounders from a season ago, has been out. They're now just getting him back in the fold. He played a combined 28 minutes in the team's last 2 games, so he's not back at full force yet. You saw Max Brooks, though, a former All-AEC Defensive Player of the Year, who's been able to give you about 2 boards, 12 points per game thus far this season, and Yinde Hakeem, he's able to go off for a triple-double on any given night. 15.5 points, 5 assists, shoots in the mid-30s from 3 points for a UMass Lowell team that they do need to clean up the 14 turnovers per game, but they do go up against an Albany team that they certainly have their turnover woes as well, with right around about 14 per contest. Credit where credit is due for Albany. They're able to generate about 9 steals per game in terms of turnovers first on a per possession basis. They're not bad, and they're actually 8th in all of college basketball with regards to opponents' 3-point shooting percentage, but this is not a UMass Lowell team that really relies upon the 3 ball, and when you take a look at Albany inside, they're 209th in all of college basketball in terms of opponents' 2-point shooting percentage, with having Jonathan Beagle really being your main man down low. He's been able to give the team right in the neighborhood about 8.5 to 9 rebounds per game, which has been rock solid, but nobody else gives you north of 5.3 rebounds per game. Amari Marshall, 15 points, shoots in the mid-30s from 3-point range, and then you've been able to have Sebastian Thomas do a nice job. Dola, 4.4 assists, 2 steals, 19 points per contest, but with this Albany team, I do have concerns with how they're going to be able to perform down low. This is a UMass Lowell team that has really been able to kick into mock turbo with regards to their offense as well. 80-plus points in 3 of their last 4 games. Last time they failed to exceed the 70-point plateau. You do have to go back to mid-December, and they've been able to get to at least 70 points in all but 1 of their games ever since December 2nd. So I do think that UMass Lowell going to be able to take it to an Albany team that has now given up 73-plus points in 4 of their last 5 games. So this is a spot where I did set my total 153.5. I do think that with Kareem Koulibaly coming back in the fold, that helps out this UMass Lowell defense. So looking at the under and willing to lay up to 3 with UMass Lowell. 306-523, 306-524. Jacksonville is going to be playing against Queens NC, and Queens NC is an underdog of a point. Total on this game is 155, and with Queens, I set them as a 4.5 point underdog. Sorry to our good friend Nick Lawrenson, but I'm going to be willing to lay with Jacksonville. With Queens, I just need to see a little bit more out of this defense. They continue to be outside the top 275 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, and for Jacksonville, you've got a few guys that have really emerged for the team. Robert McCray, the 5th, has been tremendous with 15.5 points, 2.5 assists per contest, and anyone that took the under in the good old Louisiana Monroe Jacksonville game, you had Marcus Nyblack to blame for that going over, but the guy has really been balling out recently. 12 plus points in each of the last 3 games. He does commit a lot of turnovers and a lot of fouls, but he gives you 3 assists, shoots 38.5% from 3-point range for a Jacksonville team that they themselves are now outside the top 225 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. You can tell that this Queens NC team is missing someone like a Jaden Turner, was a tremendous rebounder for them last season. Long Gavin Raines, who just unfortunately went through injury, 287th in all of college basketball's Queens NC with regards to rebound rate. So you're going to really need to have AJ McKee be able to step up. He's been able to give the team 16.5 points, 4 boards, and this is a bunch that has a pair of guys that have been able to give you about 5.5 to 6 rebounds per game. Dayton Albury, along with BJ McLaurin, they've been able to combine for about 20.5 points, 11.5 boards, both shooting north of 35.5% from 3-point range, but it is a little bit of a top-heavy Queens team that does turn the ball over 12.5 times per contest. So you'd like to see that get cleaned up a little bit, especially against the Jacksonville team that's been able to generate about 8.5 steals per game. Both of these teams in a little bit of rough form, as Jacksonville, they themselves give it up north of 80 points in 3 of their last 4 games against D1 competition. Meanwhile, this is a Queens team that they're just going to give up 75 plus on the regular. I do like Jacksonville to be able to get the job done here. Did set them as a 4.5 point favorite, so want to lay the number in. Did set my total 156.5. Queens NC looking to run it and gun it. Jacksonville has underwent an identity change as well, so looking at the over and going to be willing to lay with Jacksonville. 306-525, 306-526, and JIT is going to be playing us to New Hampshire. New Hampshire is a 3.5 point favorite. Your total on this game, it is 151, and there with New Hampshire. I set them as a 7-point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay the number. New Hampshire as one of the best mid-major players in all of college basketball. That would be Clarence Daniels, who's been able to give you 20.5 points, 9 boards per contest for a New Hampshire team that all of a sudden is really cranking up their tempo. Top 65 team with regards to possessions per game in all of college basketball. And this is a New Hampshire team that has taken a little bit of a step back on defense, but you know what? For this conference, it's not too bad. New Hampshire, about 163rd in all of college basketball in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, a top 100 team in terms of cutting off the three-point arc thanks to the versatility of Ahmad Robinson. 5.3 assists, 4.5 boards, 16 points on a steal and a half per contest for a New Hampshire team that as a whole, they shoot 35.5% from three, only turn the ball over about 11.5 times per contest. Jackson Baker is able to give you 6 rebounds per game, so NJIT is going to be completely outgunned down low. Now, credit where credit is due. NJIT has been able to get a little bit more out of Adam Hess, Elijah Buchanan, combining for about 23 points per contest. You got Hess shooting 40% from three-point range, and NJIT cutting down on those turnovers to right around about 12.3 per contest. But NJIT, they're just going to be completely outgunned on the glass, 332nd in the country with regards to overall rebound rate. It is an NJIT team that does see a little bit of boost, being at home 309th in the country in terms of points scored on a per possession basis, though. So that has been rather rough for this team. The defense has been much better, and the offense has actually scored a half a point less per 100 possessions at home rather than in a roadside court environment. So that has been rather rough for the team, with NJIT not having anyone other than Buchanan that gives you north of 6 rebounds per game. They're going to get, in my opinion, just crushed by a New Hampshire team that has been very much a constant with their offense getting to at least 70 points at each of their last 5 games, and it's an NJIT team that comes in having scored fewer than 70 points against D1 competition, and now 3 of their last 4 games. So it is a circumstance where I'm going to be willing to lay with New Hampshire, and I did set my total out of 151. I do think that New Hampshire going to be able to get things going against NJIT. It is an NJIT team that has been rather inefficient with their offense, and I'm seeing a 152 out there, so at the 152, going to be looking under, and I'm going to be willing to lay with New Hampshire. 306-527, 306-528. North Florida plays us at Kennesaw State. We give our ode to Lane Kiffin. Go Owls, as Kennesaw State is a 1.5 to 1 point favorite. Total on this game is 161, and did set my total 165. Looking at the over, Kennesaw State, a top 5 team in all of college basketball in terms of total possessions per game, and North Florida doesn't necessarily play at a breakneck pace or anything like that. They're just really bad on defense while being actually halfway decent on offense. North Florida about 169th in the country in terms of points scored on a per possession basis, but boy oh boy is this team giving it up. 328th in all of college basketball in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. They are giving up about 11.5 points fewer per 100 possessions at home rather than in a road/court environment, and I do like Jake Vanderheiden, the transfer from Bucknell, got right around about 6'9" size, is able to bury about a 35 to 36% clip from three-point range, and for Kennesaw State, the three-point shooting percentage starting to pick up. They're now right around 33% from 3. I think it'll go a little bit further with having Tyrell Burton along with Simeon Kodal be able to combine for about 31.5 points per game in the backcourt. Kodal gives you about 3 assists. Burton, 6.2 assists at 2.8 turnovers per game for Kennesaw State, and how quickly they play. 12.3 turnovers per game, not too bad. They go up against a North Florida team that doesn't force any steals whatsoever, but they do have guys that are able to shoot it from three-point range. Dorian James along with Chaz Lanier, they've both been able to shoot north of 40% from three-point range. Lanier is able to give you about 16.5 points per contest. It is a North Florida team, though, that they are going to be very prone to giving up the three ball. Really, both of these teams, they've got their issues defensively. Kennesaw State, not too bad with regards to their three-point shooting defense at 154th. North Florida, 267th, and I do think that Kennesaw State going to continue to improve with their three-point shooting, and with them and Robinson down low giving you 8+ rebounds per game, should be able to dominate on that front against a North Florida team well outside the top 275 with regards to rebound rate. So it sets Kennesaw State as a 3-point favorite. Willing to lay it. Think that you get a run it and gun it game. Set my total 165. So also looking at the over. 306-529, 306-530. UMBC plays us of Maine. Maine hopes to not get Maine as a 3 to 4 point favorite. Total on this game between 151.5 and 153. Did set my total 152.5. Personally, I would rather have the 151.5 over, because with UMBC, they just have not been able to play a lick of defense all season long. And it's a UMBC team that is just really playing at a pace that is just warp speed. 11th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. They do go up against a Maine team that is well outside the top 300 in terms of total possessions per game, but for UMBC, they just have an uncanny ability to be able to speed teams up because they just pretty much offer free points. For UMBC, they're 263rd in all of college basketball with regards to rebound rate. That's going to be an issue because that's where you need to really exploit this Maine team. Maine does a really good job of being able to generate turnovers, which allows them to turn defense into offense, and they actually have the leader in steals from a season ago, and Kellen Tynes hasn't quite done that this season, but he is still generating about 2 steals, giving you 3.5 assists, 14 points per contest for a Maine team that they struggle from three-point range, shooting just 29.2% from distance, but UMBC at home, they're allowing opponents to shoot about 37% from the outside, and this is a Maine team that they could be at from the outside away from home. They're allowing opponents to shoot 35% from three-point range, but despite the fact that Maine isn't too great on the glass, you do have the best rebounder on their side, Peter Filipovsky, who's been able to give you 7.5 boards, 13.5 points per game. And for UMBC, they've turned Deion Brown into a do-it-all player, 6.5 boards, 17.5 points, shoots 34% from three, and all in all, it is a UMBC team that they are shooting about 37.5% from three-point range. They're doing this all while turning the ball over 14 times per contest. That is going to play right into the hands of Maine, who is able to do a relatively solid job of being able to generate those turnovers. And for UMBC, they only see a bump of about 3.5 points more per 100 possessions at home rather than in a road/neutral-court environment. And this is a Maine team that has been able to do a relatively solid job of having their game travel, even though they are relatively rough from three-point range. This is a squad that they don't see too much of a drop-off with that regard when they do leave home. Meanwhile, it's a UMBC team that they just have been all sorts of inconsistent with being able to pull in their rebounds. They're actually shooting the exact same from three-point range at home rather than in a road/neutral-court environment, with UMBC not having a lot just in terms of anything set at the point guard spot. I do think that Maine is going to be able to take control of this game. Did set Maine as a 4.5 point favorite, so I'm going to be one to lay the number. And I do think that Maine is going to take it to a UMBC team that's just giving up points on the regulars. Did set my total 152.5, so looking at the 151.5 over and one to lay with Maine. 306-531, 306-532. It is Winthrop. They play us to UNC Asheville. Asheville is an underdog of 4.5 points with your total 146. I did set Winthrop as a favorite of 4.5 points, seeing some 3.5s out there as well. At a 3.5, I'm going to be willing to lay it with a Winthrop team that has been able to do a relatively solid job with their offense. They don't necessarily have a ton of rebounding this season, with having a bit of a fall off with regards to some of the guys that returned from last season. Kelton Telford last year gave you 8+ rebounds per game. That's been down to more of about 5.5 rebounds per game. Alex Zimmerman, the transfer from Bucknell, has actually been your top rebounder, so Drew Pember should be able to have some success with that regard for a UNC Asheville team that certainly is outside the top 200 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, but Pember, 20 points, 7.5 boards, gives you 3.5 assists on about 33% three-point shooting. It is a bunch that also has a nice facilitator with about 5 assists, 6 points per contest, and Caleb Burgess, but very top-heavy team. You've got Fletcher Aby, along with Nicholas McMillan, give you about 10.5 points per contest, and then Josh Banks, 13 points, 4 boards, throws it in at a 40% clip from three-point range. And for Aby, he does shoot 44% from three-point range as well. Winthrop, the big key for them, being able to cut off the three-point arc, and they are 19th in all of college basketball in opponents' three-point shooting percentage. I think that this is a very bad matchup for a UNC Asheville team that they give up quite a few open looks inside from the outside. They are a team that ranks in the top 40 themselves in terms of opponents' three-point shooting percentage, but Winthrop is a team that they look to be able to generate those good chews. They've got Kason Harrison, who's been able to give you about 4.5 assists per contest. Hasn't shot it well from three-point range, but is able to muscle it in down low with Telford. Even though he's not been able to do a tremendous job on the glass, has been able to give you about 13.5 points per game, and I do think that Winthrop wins from within with their offense. So I did set my line at 4.5. I'm going to be willing to lay up to 3.5 here, and I did set my total at 150.5. Got a pair of teams that are well outside the top 175 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, and a Nashville team that has been kicking up their tempo a little bit, 85th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. So looking at the over and going to be willing to lay it with Winthrop. 306-533, 306-534. North Alabama, it's a road face-off against Austin Peay. Austin Peay is a favorite of 2 points. Their on this game is 139.5. Made Austin Peay the favorite of 3.5 points. So I'm going to be willing to lay it. It's an Austin Peay team that's well outside the top 300 in terms of total possessions per game. The defense, I'm not going to say it's efficient, but I'm not going to say it's awful either, with Austin Peay about 220th in all of college basketball in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, going up against a North Alabama team that has been looking to gun it. They're a top 50 team in the country in terms of total possessions per game. For North Alabama, they certainly haven't given it up when they've been away from home. They're giving up about 7.3 points more per 100 possessions when they're in a road/neutral-court environment, ranking 236th in all of college basketball in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. And for the North Alabama team, you do have guys that are able to throw it in the bucket. Jakari Lane, along with KJ Johnson, are combined for about 27.5 points per contest, both shooting in the mid-30s from three-point range. And to the credit of North Alabama, they do a nice job of not getting out of sorts with the ball, only turning the ball over about 11.2 times per contest. But North Alabama, 300th in the country with regards to opponents' three-point shooting percentage. Interestingly enough, Austin Peay has the leader in three-point shooting percentage from a season ago among qualifying players back in DeMarcus Sharp, and he's the top scorer for the team. 17.5 points, 7.5 boards, 4.5 assists. He has not made a three all season long, but you do have ancillary pieces like an Isaac Haney, who is now finally back in the fold for the team after being a two-time transfer that was barred from playing to begin with. 9 points per game, shooting 42% from three-point range. Javonte Black, 11.5 points. He shoots 38% from three-point range. This is an Austin Peay team that, when it comes to their perimeter defense, it's much better than it is down low, because down low you just don't have a lot of rebounding with this team. It is an Austin Peay team that, with regards to opponents' three-point shooting percentage, they're clocking in right around around about 70th. So I do think that they're going to take away the lifeblood of this North Alabama team. North Alabama should be able to get quite a bit down low out of Damari Forrest, who's been able to give you about 8 rebounds per game. That said, I do think that Austin Peay going to do a nice job taking control of this game. Austin Peay has been able to do a solid job of being able to take care of the ball while they themselves generate about 8 steals per contest, and it's a North Alabama team that has hit a rut with their offense, scoring 72 points or fewer in 4 of their last 5 games. Meanwhile, it's an Austin Peay team that they themselves have had a little bit of an up and down sort of stretch with regards to their defense, but still have given up 70 points or fewer in 3 of their last 5 games, with one of those games coming against Memphis where they gave up north of 70. So did somebody total 143.5. I do think that North Alabama finds their flow a little bit more, and this game comes down to late game fouling, but I do think in the end, Austin Peay pulls it up, willing to lay the number, and going to be taking a look at the over, and we're at things up with 3 of 6, 535, 3 of 6, 536. Lipscomb plays us to Central Arkansas. Central Arkansas is a 15-point underdog with a total on this game anywhere between 154 and 154.5. Did somebody total 154. Now that we're getting the hook on that, I'm going to be taking a look at the under. If we can get to a 153 or less, we'll be looking at the over. It's a Central Arkansas team that has had to slow down their tempo. Typically, this is a top 40 team in all of college basketball in terms of total possessions per game. They've been mid-tempo this season because they've been dealing with a few injuries, so Elias Cato should be good to go in this game, but has really hit a rut recently. For Elias Cato, he's outscored 10 points or fewer in 4 of the last 5 games that he's played in, was prior to Christmas, averaging 13 plus points per contest. It has really become a situation where Tucker Anderson, who is a true freshman for the team, has had to become Mr. Do-It-All. 14 points on 39% three-point shooting, giving you about 3.5 rebounds per game. And then when it comes to the Central Arkansas team, you just don't have a lot down low, along with 13 turnovers per game, while being a team that is outside the top 300 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. As a matter of fact, that rebound rate for Central Arkansas, 322nd in all of college basketball, and that's where you're supposed to hurt this Lipscomb team. Lipscomb was supposed to have Jacob Mugjesevich do a solid job down low, has not been seen all season long after he was the team's top scorer a season ago. As a result, Lipscomb just 256th in the country with regards to their rebound rate, but you've been able to get some really good production out of Will Pruitt, do-it-all player that doesn't necessarily have a lot of size, but 3.5 assists, 13 points, 6.5 boards on 36.5% three-point shooting, and it is a Lipscomb team that, as a whole, they're shooting about 36.5% from three-point range, facing a Central Arkansas team that's 347th in all of college basketball with regards to three-point shooting percentage of their opponents. Lipscomb about 136th with this regard at home. Opponents are shooting just 29.9% against them. You've got Owen McCormick, who's got a little bit of versatility, comes in for Presbyterian at 6'9", shooting 39% from 3, 9.5 points, 4.5 boards. And here's what else you should love about this Lipscomb team as well. Each of their top 6 scorers shoot at least 77.8% at the free throw line while turning the ball over just 11.2 times per contest. So Lipscomb, the far smarter team. I do think that they get it done against the Central Arkansas team that has been hampered all season long, willing to lay up to 15.5 with Lipscomb. Somebody total 154, so I have 154.5. Also diving in on the under, and that wrap things up for the Thursday edition of Coast to Coast Hoops, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. If you do like hearing from this fine podcast, Coast to Coast Hoops, you're able to subscribe wherever your podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Spotify, Stitcher, and TuneIn. If you have a question, comment, segment idea, what have you for this podcast, you do have one of 2 ways via for those in. First one is my Twitter/X timeline at GNet_D1. Keep in mind, letter CM, name does not matter. As per usual, please do send these into the timeline. Other ways, find an Apple Podcast review. If you rate this podcast 5 stars, it is very much appreciated. From there, you're able to fire in whatever you'd like to hear on this podcast via that 5-star review. And a big thanks once again to Blake Lovell of Southeastern 14 for joining me in the last segment, coming at you guys every single day throughout the college basketball season. That means I'm coming at you once again tomorrow. Thank you so much for tuning in.